There are three kinds of madmen you'll see on the battlefield. Those who have completely lost their minds and only want to find death. Those devoured by hatred, who can't see anything around them. At the same time, a teenage boy's figure also appeared inside the forest. And then Ian, that mysterious young man, began to read out some very strange words. Mason, seeing this, blurted out in confusion, What is he muttering?" Logan, standing beside him, suddenly shouted angrily, "Get back, move away, I told you to get away." But Ian paid it little mind and kept going. Logan immediately raised his crossbow, face full of hatred, muttering grumpily, "That bastard." Suddenly, Ian tore the scroll he was holding in half in an instant. Out of nowhere, a blinding beam of light descended from the sky. Both Mason and Logan shouted in unison, "What the hell is that?" "It's lightning magic." A bolt struck directly where they stood. Both Logan and Mason were blasted away by the lightning, screaming in pain as they flew, unarmored and shieldless. "I'm curious about your true identity, a crazy mate. My name is Ritsuki Katayama. The moment I got the college acceptance letter, a truck suddenly barreled in front of Ian. It killed him on the spot." Ian thought to himself, "Life's a dog, isn't it? Thought my college life was finally about to start. Never expected to die like a mutt in a place like this." But when he opened his eyes, he'd been reincarnated as Ian, the son of a farmer. At that, Ren and Joanna exclaimed in shock, "No way, black hair." His family were peasants in an empire so poor it was painful. When his parents and two older brothers went out to work, Ian and his sister could only wander around all day to scavenge for food. Not far off, some other kids were jeering loudly, "Look, a crow, gross." Ian, eating grilled fish, glanced at those kids and couldn't help but brood. They don't want to be born with black hair either, I bet. Damn medieval times. I'm reborn and still have to live in this poverty. Suddenly, something appeared that caught his attention. "Is this my status board?" On it appeared the information, Ian Javin. "The system announced that you are unknown." Hearing that, he froze, able only to rue his fate. Even with a status board appearing, there was little he could do. Even if he worked his guts out every day, it would still be a life of debt that yields him nothing. Inheriting that life from his parents, he didn't even dare dream of any profession other than farming. He also had no chance to learn anything more. "I believe that if I could get an education, I could do anything well. I wonder if there's anyone out there who'd take me." Ian's train of thought was cut off by his little sister's wide, round eyes. She looked at him and pointed to her small mouth dripping saliva. Ian quickly pulled out another grilled fish and handed it to her. "Here, eat this too." Men happily took it. "Thanks, big brother." Then she excitedly said, "Let's go have dessert." He enthusiastically agreed. "Okay, let's go." A little while later, in another part of the forest, Ian warned, "Don't wander too far, okay?" Men nodded lightly and focused on picking at her dessert. He looked at her and smiled faintly, thinking to himself, "Seems like I only taught her to eat dessert not long ago. She's growing up fast." Just then, a sound nearby caught Ian's attention. He noticed a large, dark shape hiding in the bushes. He moved closer to get a better look. Ian froze and screamed when he realized what it was. It was a huge bear that had suddenly appeared, its eyes blood red. It roared loudly at the two siblings. In an instant, it swiped its sharp claws straight at them. Ian hurriedly hugged his sister tight and backed away in panic. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck the bear. Its whole body was instantly charred black. Finally, it collapsed to the ground before the two children. At that moment, Ian heard a voice call out, "Good heavens, I might have gone a bit overboard." "See ya, kiddo," the person cheerfully asked. "This is the Feldenberg territory, right?" Ian was a little wary of the person in front of him. He stammered, "Yes, that's right." But in his head he thought, "Did this person take down that bear? Who is she?" The other spoke up to introduce herself. "I'm Eredes, a traveling mage." Ian marveled, a mage. They are powerful beings who appear on battlefields, wielding exquisite skills with terrifying destructive power. Why would someone like that be in such a backwater town? Eredes scoffed, "I'm looking for a black-haired boy who lives in this town. Besides you, is there anyone else with black hair?" Ian immediately replied, "No, it's just me." She studied him for a moment and said, "Then it seems I've found the right person." Ian felt somewhat suspicious. He looked at her and asked again. At that, Eredes recalled someone's words, "Find a black-haired boy in the Feldenberg territory. If you take him as your disciple, good things will happen." She examined the protagonist carefully and thought to herself. Her eyes filled with curiosity tinged with fear. When lively meets adorable, so she just needs to take this kid as a disciple. Thinking that, Eredes laughed loudly. "Honestly, that space magic mage." Ian frowned, thinking, "I've heard mages are weird, scary types, but this one is very kind." The magic earlier was terrifyingly powerful. She destroyed the bear with a single strike. Seeing that, he directly asked, Mage, may I ask you something? What is it? About the magic you used on the bear just now. Eredes stepped closer, thought for a moment, then said excitedly, looks like you're interested in magic. He replied, I've heard magic is terrifying, but seeing it firsthand is truly wondrous. Eredes quickly answered, it's nothing special. As long as you learn, you can do it easily. After all, anyone can wield magic. Hearing that, Ian's cheeks slowly flushed. He mumbled shyly, if anyone can I learn magic too? Eredes broke into a bright smile and looked straight into Ian's eyes. Rubbing his head with her hand, of course, with a good master it's totally possible. You can become a mage too, Ian. If you want, I can teach you magic. As she spoke, Eredes reached out to him. So, want to be my apprentice? Ian looked at her, thoughtful. This could be a chance to change his life, because it meant a path beyond farming had opened up. He decisively took Eredes's hand and plainly said, yes, please teach me. The next morning, in Ian's village, suddenly a large book thudded down onto the table right in front of him. Eredes loudly reminded him, the most basic foundations of magic lie in the Maronius language. Earlier, Raven had told both Eredes and Ian, I understand, be careful, safe travels. Even the Lord nodded in agreement, all right. Keep it in mind. Eredes breathed a sigh of relief and said, it was hard to get permission from your parents and the Lord. You must work your hardest. Ian slammed his hand on the table, firmly declaring, I'm ready. She asked him once more, all right, shall we begin? He immediately answered, yes. Maronius language 53% in progress. By then Ian had read quite a few books. He also gradually pronounced the language more fluently than before. Later, the system announced, Maronius language 99% in progress. Maronius language 100% complete. Can fluently use the Grand Mage's official magic language. 7 years later, Ian gently closed the book. Eredes stood beside him, smiling, and said, theory lessons are finished. We move on to the next step. Ian was more mature now. He smiled in response. Yes. Ian Eredes Raven Novice Mage skills. Magical tongue, can use the magical tongue. A while later, in a majestic mountain range shrouded in clouds, Ian suddenly fell freely from the sky. He screamed nonstop, yelling, Master, you're moving too fast. I've only spent the past 6 years learning the Maronius language. Under the blazing noon sun, Ian's immature cries rang out, help. Seeing this, Eredes shouted loudly, listen to the sound. Ian awkwardly blurted out a jumble of sounds. He glanced around and thought to himself, in a place like this, what am I supposed to hear? I only hear the wind. Suddenly, he heard several voices in his ear. He's human, he's flying. He looks like one of us, right? Ian marveled. This is the Maronius language. The system then displayed, new skill acquired, wind magic, can use wind magic. A few hours later, Ian's curious voice rang out, the mysterious things of nature. Eredes chuckled softly. Exactly. You look pretty ridiculous right now. He replied helplessly, yes, yes, laugh away. Eredes continued instructing. Mages communicate with the mysterious forces of nature to borrow their power. That is what magic is. Ian said solemnly to himself, magic. And now, Eredes called out loudly, you can hear the voice of the wind. Next you must listen for other mysterious sounds. Ian replied excitedly, yes, leave it to me. Eredes shouted, first is water magic. In the blink of an eye, Ian was shoved into the sea. He had to dive under the water while insults rang in his ears. You're polluting the water, get out. He wanted to retort but couldn't form words, only sounds, a silent exchange. After finishing that, Eredes guided him on. Next is ice magic. In the biting cold with snow falling, Ian curled up in a barrel, hearing a voice. Human, your body is getting cold. As soon as he mastered the next power, Eredes praised. Not bad, Ian, you pick them up quickly. Then she snapped her fingers and shouted, next is fire magic. Suddenly, a great flame burst up in front of Ian. He panicked and shouted, Master. The flame itself seemed startled and yelled, what is that? A human here? Should we try burning him? Ian heard it and screamed in terror, help. In a blink, the scene shifted to the inside of a dark cave. Ian held a torch and sighed miserably. Earth magic, is this the last one? The cave spoke, so that which flows cannot be called flowing simply because it does not move. Ian, seemingly confused, complained, what is it saying? What kind of cosmic theory is that? Maybe I have no talent for earth magic, or I need more experience from other training sessions. Suddenly Ian spotted the system and cried out, oh, it's the skill board. It showed, bonus skill points awarded. Points can be used to increase magic proficiency. Current points, 100. Ian revealed a sly smile and muttered, turns out I really am the cheater in this world. Then I'll just raise earth magic, since I don't understand what it's talking about. Immediately, the system flashed a beam of light before Ian. The cave spoke, little human, beneath here the magma is flowing. Be careful, if an earthquake occurs it will erupt out. Ian softly said, "So this is Earth magic. All right, I should get out of here quickly and tell Master that I heard the voice of the Earth." He muttered, "Fire, ignite." In an instant, the torch in Ian's hand flared brightly. However, at that moment, another voice grabbed his attention. "I hate the light." Ian looked around in panic and shouted, "Someone." The voice answered him, "I am the darkness." By night, the moon had climbed to the zenith, and the clouds drifted lazily by. Eredes sat at the cave entrance, deep in thought about attending the upcoming Fire Circle Mages Conference. Suddenly, Ian burst out of the cave, running and shouting, "Master." Eredes glanced at him and leapt off the ledge, exclaiming, "You succeeded." Ian obediently reported, "Yes, and I even learned shadow magic from the darkness." Eredes was stunned for a moment. "What?" she thought to herself. "You say you heard the voice of darkness just now." Ian noticed she was just staring at him without saying more, so he hurriedly asked, "Master, are you okay?" Eredes replied, "Ian, it's time for us to go down the mountain." Ian nodded, "Yes, where are we heading?" But Eredes said, "I don't mean that. I mean we should part ways here. Go to Chronolic and attend the Time-Space Mages Conference. If you truly have the fate to command time-space magic, you'll meet a time-space mage there." Ian wondered, time-space magic. Instead, Eredes just laughed loudly, ruffled his hair, and said nothing. She smiled inwardly. Ian has a natural aptitude for the mystery. If my intuition is right, Ian could very well wield the power of time. Then we'll meet again in Dranheim in 3 years. A few days later, cries of vendors rang sweetly through a village at dusk. As sellers hawked, "Cheap goods, really cheap, come see, best wares here." Ian moved through the crowd, musing, the Time-Space Mages Conference. She really is unpredictable. Everything happened so suddenly. She did say the conference is held to the north. Anyway, I'm free for now. Might as well check it out. Time passed quickly, and now our protagonist was on the road with a group. Ian and the merchants sat around a fire to rest. Reek sat nearby, curious, turning to look. "Hey kid, is this your first time heading north?" On hearing that, he turned back. Yes, something came up suddenly. The man raised a hand and asked quietly, "So you haven't heard of Long Mountain, have you?" Ian thought of that phantom of a giant dragon and said doubtfully, "Long Mountain." Reek's voice confirmed, "Yes, in these ranges." He recalled that massive figure and couldn't help adding, "There really is a drake." Then Reek, acting familiar, clapped Ian on the shoulder and asked, "Do you know how to fight, or at least can you run fast?" Ian frowned awkwardly. "I'm not confident in either." He suddenly grew overly friendly. Reek immediately withdrew his hand and snapped, annoyed, "What? Really? Useless. What's your profession?" Ian scratched his head and answered sheepishly, "I'm a mage." Reek jumped up in horror and backed away a good distance. "A mage? What did you say?" He couldn't believe it and hurried to confirm. "Is that true?" Ian pressed his lips and affirmed, "Yes." Kathy jolted and cast a probing glance to the side. Calf, holding a cup of water, also gasped. "A mage," Ojin, equally stunned, shouted, "Him, Ian." Seeing that, he asked warily, "Is there a problem?" He couldn't help thinking to himself, "What's with this atmosphere?" Reek snatched the cup from his hand and, flattering, said, "It's nothing, I'll take this for you." He stared wide-eyed and stammered, "No, I'm fine, really." Ian watched in bewilderment as the man's back disappeared, clutching the cup and running off. He froze when a mocking voice sounded behind him, "That thing a maid." Ojin let out a cold laugh, contemptuous, pathetic. Caleb laughed loudly along, "Looks so weak." Ryan sneered, raising a hand loudly, "Then even the strays here must be mages." Ian looked at the man, puzzled. What's wrong with those guys? Right after, Kathy came over beside him and softly said, "You." She raised a hand and whispered, "If you really are a mage, you should teach them a lesson to shut them up." Ian frowned in surprise. "Teach them a lesson?" Kathy immediately sat down beside him and explained, "Whether you're a mage or not doesn't matter. Mercenaries despise anyone who looks meek." She glanced toward the group and added, "So you have to show some power to scare them off." Cassie tilted her head toward him and earnestly reminded, "Do that, and if anything happens, they'll come back to protect you." Ian was startled, looked at her dumbfounded, and said nothing. After a moment, he glanced ahead, thinking, "She's right, but how should I do it? I've never really gotten angry before." Nearby, Dion sneered and spat into the bowl he'd just received. Then he casually wiped the rim with a leaf. Seeing that, Ian's anger flared, veins standing out. He just spat into his bowl. Holding the bowl, he felt the ground tremble beneath his feet and shouted in alarm, "What is that? An earthquake?" Suddenly, the man looked up in surprise when he heard Ian's voice. Ian, his face darkened, stood straight in front of Dion and word by word demanded, "Why did you dare spit in my bowl?" Dion's entire body shook with fear, and he fell to his knees on the ground, trembling. Not daring to look up as he begged, "I am so sorry, Lord Maid." Ian rolled his eyes in sheer exasperation when he heard the guy's explanation. I just thought I should clean the dish. His eyes went wide, and he put his hands on his hips, yelling, then shouldn't you wash it with water? Dion froze upon hearing that and asked in a low voice, but isn't water dirty? Ian asked back in complete shock, what did you just say? Dion frowned, thinking of the rivers filled with mud, lime, and parasites. How could I possibly use water to wash a dish? Ian's jaw dropped so hard he looked completely drained of color when Dion added, spit is way more hygienic. In the pitch-black darkness of the forest night, those words kept echoing over and over in his head, way more hygienic, way more hygienic. Looking at the blank stares on everyone's faces, Ian thought to himself, unbelievable. His entire body went rigid, and he stood completely rooted to the spot. Medieval hygiene standards really were mind-blowing. One of the mercenaries reached out to gently touch Ian and called, Lord Mate. Next, a faint smirk played on Ian's lips, and he quickly began chanting a magic spell. Streams of bright red light quickly flew straight into the nearby burning campfire. The group jumped in shock when they saw the flames shoot high up into the sky. They all stared fixedly at the fire, letting out cries of disbelief. What the? Nearby, Cassie also stared blankly at the roaring fire. Ian didn't budge, standing completely still on the spot as he commanded, go fetch me some water right now. Then, unable to hold it in any longer, he threw both arms into the air and roared, you filthy medieval people. Dion immediately turned around and ran away as fast as his legs could carry him, thinking, I have no clue what's going on, but he looks like he's completely lost his mind. Late at night, the campfire was put out, and the group headed back to their tents to rest. Owen led the group forward and asked around, did Kathy really go this way? Sepp smiled next to him and said, that's right. With a bright smile on his face, Sepp imagined the two of them together, thinking, perfect, this time I'm keeping Kathy all to myself. Owen looked up at a dark figure in the distance and shouted loudly. Spotting her, his face flushed as he raised a hand and yelled, hey, it's dark out, come with me. Immediately after, his brows knit tightly together as he took a closer look. He let out a gasp of shock when he saw Nihin carrying Kathy over his shoulder. Owen immediately barked out, what? Who the hell are you guys? Suddenly, an arrow flew from the opposite direction, piercing right through the chest of Caleb, who was standing next to him. Seeing him collapse, Ojen cursed in a rage. You bastards, how dare you do that to our man? He drew his sword and led the charge with the men behind him, rushing in to kill them. Seeing this, Nihin frowned in sheer contempt and scoffed. This weak bunch doesn't look like much at all. Suddenly, Kathy, who was slung over his shoulder, snapped her eyes wide open. She then bit down with all her might into Nathan's shoulder, making him let out a sharp cry of pain. Nathan let go and violently slammed Kathy down onto the ground, clutching his wound tight. Her whole body trembling, she immediately scrambled to her feet and quickly ran away. Clutching his shoulder, he watched Kathy run off into the distance and roared, the target is escaping after her. Inside his tent, Ian lay with his head resting on his elbow, deep in thought. His brows were knit tightly together, and his mouth kept muttering continuously, spit is absolutely unacceptable. Suddenly, Ian sat straight up in a panic when an urgent voice came shouting, humans are coming, wake up, hurry. Ian sat completely still on his bed, looking utterly confused. What is this? He looked outside as a shouting voice echoed from the camp, Lord Maid. With a look of pure panic on his face, Reek pulled back the tent flap and yelled, we've got trouble. At night, the bright full moon illuminated the entire forest. When Ian stepped out of his tent, he saw the men locked in a fierce, brutal battle. A man swung his blade, effortlessly cutting down an opposing soldier right in front of him. Stomping his foot onto the corpse, he barked out orders, I don't care, just kill them all. Nihin raised his sword high, looking around at the men and added, find that woman. Kathy tightly gripped the straps of the bag she was wearing, hiding behind a nearby tree trunk. Terrified, she clutched her head and crouched down anxiously, thinking, what should I do? At this rate, I'm going to get caught. Suddenly, Kathy gasped as she felt the tip of a sword pointing directly at her head. Victor looked down at her with a cold, haughty stare and said flatly, so here you are. A vicious smirk crossed his face, and he barked fiercely, get up right now or I'll chop your hand off. Kathy's entire face went pale, and her whole body shook violently with fear, thinking, it's over. Right after that, seeing that she wasn't moving, Victor raised the sword in his hand high into the air. Suddenly, his eyes went wide, and he looked behind him in absolute shock. A powerful blast of energy came rushing from afar, sending Victor flying backward. Not too far away, Ian stood with his hand raised, the residual magic around him not yet faded. Kathy immediately snapped her head up to look at him. Ian reached out and quickly grabbed her hand, pulling her up. A gentle smile touched his lips as he gave a soft reminder, stay close and follow me. Kathy stared at him in a daze, pressing her lips together without saying a single word. A group of people formed a straight line, each placing their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them. Reek, standing at the very back of the line, threw up an arm and shouted loudly, "The Lord Mage is ready." Hearing this, Ian placed a hand over his chest and closed his eyes, thinking, "Good then." His lips moved slightly as he began to chant, "Oh darkness." Immediately after, sparks of magic light flashed across the sky. Ian raised a hand, and streams of dark aura and blue light quickly gathered together. Seeing the dark aura manifest around them, everyone cried out in terror, "What on earth is this? Is the entire place being swallowed by darkness?" Shouts of panic erupted. "I can't see a thing. Damn it, light the torches." Torches were quickly lit up one by one. In the pitch blackness, Ian led Reek's group forward, thinking, "Good, if we just keep moving like this." Suddenly, the system panel flashed open. Skill activated, dark vision, allows clear sight in total darkness. Out of nowhere, a loud shout shattered the dark night. Aeon appeared right behind Reek holding a torch and announced loudly, "Over here." He immediately raised his sword high. "Where do you think you're running off to?" Reek looked utterly petrified, shaking like a leaf. "Spare me." Ian turned his head back from the front, his eyes flashing with a brilliant blue light, thinking, "Fire burn." Along with a terrifying roar, the flames from the torch exploded outward, completely engulfing Aeon. In the blink of an eye, the guy collapsed onto the ground, covered in severe burns. The remaining men froze dead in their tracks at the sight, completely paralyzed with shock. Ian gritted his teeth and stared intently in that direction, thinking, this should be enough to scare them off. Right after that, panic cries rang out one after another. "It's a mage. There's a mage over there." Seeing this, Nihan raised his sword, took the lead, and charged forward as everyone rushed in. Suddenly, the crowd froze dead in their tracks, not daring to move an inch. Andrian also stood there paralyzed with fear, completely motionless. Right in front of his face was the massive head of a giant drake, and immediately following, it was a horrific scream, accompanied by the sound of loud crunching and swallow. Witnessing this scene, everyone around was scared absolutely stiff. Even the protagonist could only stand there, completely rooted to the spot. He looked at the glowing eyes and the long tail, thinking, a drake. Nihan stared at the fresh blood dripping from the beast's mouth as it let out a low growl. Right after that, he immediately turned on his heel and bolted. Reek raised a hand and pointed in that direction, his voice trembling as he said, "Sir Mage, there's a dragon." Ian cast his eyes toward the drake, sighing inwardly, "This is bad." Finding himself caught in its gaze, he thought in a panic, "At this rate, we're completely done for." The system's voice rang out, "You have witnessed the primal mystery." Ian looked at the notification window before him, letting out a confused hum. The screen continued to display, "New skill acquired, summoning magic, capable of communicating with and summoning mystical creatures." Ian stared at the drake in front of him, wondering, summoning magic. Furrowing his brows, he began to deduce, could it be that even that drake over there is just like the mysteries I've encountered before? He tightly clenched his trembling fist. If that's the case then. Hearing Ian's call, the drake tilted its head slightly. "Oh drake." Reek and the others also stared at him in sheer terror. "Sir Mage." The drake opened its massive maw, its eyes narrowing slightly as it glared down at Ian. With a perfectly calm expression, he continuously reassured himself, "It's fine, I can do this." Rays of blue light began to flash from Ian's body, because the mystery has never once betrayed me. He placed a hand firmly against his chest and shouted, "I am your friend." With a dead serious expression, he raised a finger and pointed at the drake, adding, "Friend, no bullying, no fighting." The drake narrowed its eyes at him, letting out a series of low rumble. Another person looked over anxiously, whispering, "I wonder what it's saying." Furrowing his brows, Reek placed a finger over his lips as a reminder, "Quiet, Sir Mage is listening." Ian continued to stare unmovingly at the drake in front of him, but inside his head, he was frantically holding his skull and wailing, "What the hell is it saying?" In the end, Ian could only steel his resolve. No other choice. I have to use my points to level up the skill. He reached out and gently tapped the system's screen, dumping all his points into summoning magic. Immediately afterward, a notification flashed right before his eyes. Summoning magic capability has increased. The deep, rumbling voice of the drake echoed in his mind. Ian's eyes widened in sheer astonishment. "I can hear it." He immediately looked up and called out, "Lord Drake." It instantly let out a roar, opening its massive mouth wide and unleashing a gust of wind that nearly blew Ian's group away. "If you have something to say, spit it out." The corners of his lips curled up slightly as he thought to himself. As expected, this method worked. Right after that, Ian reached out and cleared his throat. After a brief pause, he continued, "Lord Drake, I have absolutely no intention of fighting you." Hearing this, the drake replied with pure disdain, "A mere human wanting to fight me. How laughable." Not minding it at all, Ian pressed on. "Exactly, we would undoubtedly be killed in the blink of an eye. To a powerful entity like you, Lord Drake, we aren't even worth your time. Hearing that, it questioned him in confusion. Are you asking me to spare your lives? Standing behind him, Reek asked anxiously. Is it telepathy? Kathy still watched the scene ahead with a deeply worried expression. The Drake opened its mouth and added, precisely, I can't even be bothered to kill you guys. Hearing these words, Ian couldn't hide his delight. Perfect, looks like we're in the clear. But he suddenly froze when he heard it cut itself off. The Drake's eyes flashed with a bright white light as it growled. Right now, I am in an extremely foul mood. Shaking from head to toe, Reek looked up and cried out, Sir Mate. Seeing this, Ian also gritted his teeth, cursing inwardly. Damn it, what am I supposed to do now? Ian looked at the Drake, falling into deep thought. So basically, he's telling me to get out of his sight. There's no other way, I'll just have to address this directly. Right after that, he looked up at the beast and called out loudly, Lord Drake. Standing his ground, Ian held out a hand and inquired, Why is your mood so terrible? The Drake shot back with utter contempt. Why should I explain that to a human? It calmly listened as Ian's voice rang out in response. I just thought that, perhaps, I might be able to help with something. The Drake reared up, extending its claws forward. How arrogant. What could a puny human like you possibly achieve? Immediately afterward, Ian bowed his head and let out a resounding chant. Streams of energy from the sky, rivers, and surrounding lakes rapidly gathered and shot straight up into the air. Sensing the gathering energy, the crowd standing behind Kathy gasped in utter astonishment. The Drake also noticed the sudden surge of magic in the air, letting out a confused grunt. On the other side, swirls of pure white magic wrapped tightly around Ian's body. Seeing this, the Drake opened its mouth and exclaimed, Well, this is somewhat interesting. Ian opened his eyes to look at the radiant light surrounding him, smiling as he replied, I am merely an ordinary mage searching for the world's mysteries. Therefore, I hope to offer what little strength I have to assist. The Drake lowered its head, staring intently down at him. After a long silence, its voice finally boomed in agreement. Very well. From this moment on, let the negotiations begin. Within the quiet forest, Ian looked at the Drake standing opposite him, thinking, his killing intent has completely vanished. He raised a hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead, letting out a silent sigh of relief. At least the immediate danger is gone. Now it's time to show what I can do. Ian closed his eyes and stroked his chin in contemplation. It's not like I'm completely helpless here, but I can't let him drag me by the nose with a bunch of bizarre demands either. Suddenly, his eyes flew wide open as he recalled Eurydice's words of advice in a flash. Do you understand, Ian? With one hand on her hip, Eurydice had gently instructed him, You cannot use magic if you cannot communicate with the mystery. Therefore, the relationship you build with them is absolutely vital. Eurydice's voice had echoed, adding, Are they friends or subordinates? Every mystery possesses a unique personality. For a mage, the core requirement is to understand and empathize with the mystery's emotion. Snapping back to reality, a faint smile tugged at the corner of Ian's lips. That's right. For a mage, the absolute most important thing is communication tactics. All right, let's see how I handle this Drake. He cast his eyes to the side, whispering, Manifest skill window. Right after that, Ian let out a surprised gasp when he saw the notification panel. Advanced Summoning Technique by Demonet. Contrasting his calm exterior, his heart was leaping for joy. This is exactly what I needed. Ian stared intently at the floating screen. On it, the text read, No matter what, always offer them incredibly strong alcohol. The larger the body, the more high-proof the liquor needs to be. Following that, the words on the screen continued to flash. Flatter them as much as humanly possible. He froze in place, asking blankly, What the hell is this? Ian slumped to the ground, thinking in despair. This is a disaster. An introverted loner like me could never pull this off. Sensing his thoughts, the Drake wondered in confusion, What is a loner? He immediately snapped his head up, filled with absolute determination. No, first I have to gain this Drake's favor. Once I do that, a breakthrough will follow. Seeing Ian hesitate, the Drake took the initiative to demand, Well, what is it? With a face full of sincerity, the boy spoke up, I have prepared a gift for you. Lord Drake, would it be acceptable for me to present it to you? It tilted its head, looking down from above. A gift? Fine, bring it here. Without even turning his head back, Ian called out loudly, Reek. Startled, the old man immediately replied, Why yes. He turned his head back, loudly urging him on. Go to the cargo wagon and bring over our strongest liquor right now, hurry. Just a short while later, a row of high-proof liquor barrels of various colors was laid out on the ground. The Drake lowered its head to look down, thoroughly displeased. What a stingy-looking offering. Ian closed his eyes and gently added, In the human world, the scarcer the quantity, the more expensive it actually is. In his mind, he couldn't help but shake his fist. What the hell are you complaining about? Right after that, he swiftly poured a large cup of the liquor. Holding the freshly poured cup, Ian raised it toward the drake standing opposite him. Here. Catching a whiff of the rising fumes, it used a claw to pinch its snout shut. What on earth is this smell? Looking down from above, the drake unleashed a heavy, crushing pressure, demanding, "Mage, you aren't trying to pull a fast one on me, are you?" Seeing this, Ian offered a gentle smile. "Not at all. In that case, I will drink first to prove it." He raised the cup to his lips, threw his head back, and downed it in one go. Reek's group stood anxiously in the background, watching the scene unfold with bated breath. After finishing it off, Ian wiped the corner of his mouth with his hand, smiling as he said, "See, absolutely no problem at all." Meanwhile, he couldn't help but gag internally, thinking, "Wow, this stuff is incredibly potent." The drake kept two of its claws covering its nose. "I see, the scent is exceptionally strong." Nevertheless, it lowered its head to look at the cup. Ian's voice resonated in its ears, saying, "Please give it a taste. I am confident you will be pleased." The drake used its massive claws to gently lift the cup, inspecting it closely. Then it extended its tongue and took a hesitant, testing lick. The group watched with deeply anxious expressions, clasping their hands together in silent prayer. On the other side, the drake drained the entire cup, its face flushing a deep red. Ian looked over at it and inquired, "Well, how is it?" Its voice boomed back in response, "It's not exactly delicious." Ian's eyes widened as he listened to the drake's next words. "But for some reason, it's incredibly addictive." Beaming with joy, Ian picked up another jug of liquor. "Please have some more. It gets significantly better from here on out." The drake asked uncertainty, "Is that so?" Amidst the darkness of the night, the bright full moon continued to illuminate the entire forest. With a completely flushed face, the drake held up the cup it had just emptied. Standing beside it, Ian used a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his brow as he heard the beast roar out, "You call this liquid liquor? I love it." He looked at the pile of empty wooden barrels before him, worrying. He is already down more than 7 barrels and still hasn't passed out. With a completely blank look on his face, Ian gave a big thumbs up, thinking, "This guy's tolerance is absolutely insane, truly commendable." He looked down and took a small sip from his own cup, murmuring, "I was planning to sneak away while he was asleep, but it looks like that's out of the question." Suddenly, Ian's eyes went wide as he heard the drake ask, "Human, you asked me earlier, didn't you, why my mood was so foul?" He immediately spoke up in response, "Yes." Noticing the drake's tear-filled eyes, Ian was startled. Why did he suddenly become so incredibly sentimental? Through the dark night air, its sorrowful voice echoed, "My nest is in a terrible location, and it's far more cramped than everyone else's." The drake threw its head back and wailed, "Even so, she still told me it was a comfortable place." Ian froze like a statue, staring over with a deeply judging look. Is that how it is? Internally, he couldn't help but wonder. He actually has a girlfriend, with a face like that. The beast lowered its head and added in a hushed tone, "But I don't know when it started." The drake's dejected voice continued to ring out, catching him off guard. The others began to mock. Its entire body trembled as it gritted its teeth tightly. "Just because she was beside someone like me, I feel so incredibly guilty toward her." The drake's eyes flashed with a golden light as it looked up at the sky and let out a massive roar. "So I was the one who broke it off." On the other side, Reek's sleeping group was startled awake by the noise, shouting, "What the?" The drake kept its head turned toward the sky, continuously letting out mournful cries. The 3 members of Reek's group simultaneously collapsed to their knees, clasping their hands in prayer. Ian looked up at the beast, contemplating. The affection he holds for his loved one is no different from a human's. Suddenly, I feel a bit of pity for him. He placed a hand on his chin, calculating his options. "Wait a minute, if I play this card right." Hearing Ian call out to it, the drake turned its tear-streaked face toward him. "Lord Drake." Resting a hand on his knee, the boy stood up straight. "I will use magic to help you remodel your nest." Startled, it looked over and questioned, "What, you will?" A subtle smile played on Ian's lips as he followed up, "That's right, but in exchange." With his hands on his hips and a face full of smiles, he asked, "Would you be willing to grant me one request?" The next morning, daylight gradually illuminated the entire expanse of the towering cliffside. Ian stood up straight, his face entirely composed. Leaning against the back of the cargo wagon, Reek was still muttering half asleep. "Yes, I miss you too, my darling." Ian placed a single finger against the man's forehead, whispering, "Forgive me." As Reek kept babbling in his sleep with pouted lips, Ian grew immensely irritated, veins visibly popping on his forehead. Leaning in close to the man's ear, he said coldly, "If you don't wake up right now, I am going to snap your fingers off." Reek looked utterly petrified when he noticed Ian staring right at him with a dead serious expression. He immediately backed away a good distance in a panic, letting out a loud yell. The carriage lost its balance, sending Reek and the others on board tumbling flat on their backs. He and the rest of the group scrambled right back up and darted their eyes over. Reek couldn't hide his utter confusion, asking, "Mage, what on earth is going on?" Ian chimed in, perfectly calm. "I vaguely remember the drake letting out a roar." Hearing this, Reek added, "And then everyone blacked out." Ian cursed angrily to himself. "Damn it, I should have never picked these guys up." Kathy looked over and asked anxiously, "Did the drake go back to its nest?" Ian denied it. "No, it's waiting right up there." Reek tightly grabbed Julian, who was right next to him. "Is it waiting to eat us?" Ian replied with a deadpan look, "No." Ian looked down at the group and said, "It's waiting for me. I made a deal with it on the condition that I'd help you guys." Kathy frowned and repeated, unsure, "A deal?" Reek cried out, deeply moved, "The mage is sacrificing himself for us." Ian frowned and turned away, thinking, maybe I meddled where I shouldn't have. He couldn't help but think back to last night's scene. He had told it, "Let these people go, and in return I'll fix your nest." Behind him, Reek raised a finger and pointed straight up, shouting, "The great archmage Raven Eredes Ian." Julian also yelled at the top of his lungs, "Raven Eredes Ian." Hearing the shouting, Ian snapped his head back in surprise. What the hell? Immediately after, a chant of praise rang out. "Master Ian is so cool," defeating the drake, roaring right back, crushing. The voices of Reek and his two companions echoed continuously. "So badass," cursing out the drake, "incredible," telling it off. They roared in pure excitement, and in the end, you actually made the drake submit. With tears streaming down their faces, Reek's trio pumped their fists and yelled, "Submit." Reek immediately stepped forward and barked out, "From this day on, we ride or die with the mage. We will protect you with our lives." Andrian, right behind him, instantly chimed in at the top of his lungs, "Amen." Ian stared back blankly, thinking, I don't even know what these guys are talking about. He raised a hand, pointing at the three of them as he instructed, "Have everything ready to move before I get back. Do not leave without me." Reek placed a hand over his heart and promised, "Don't you worry, we are one entity now." Ian muttered blankly, "All right." Seeing him leave, Reek immediately turned around and ordered, "All right, first things first, let's do a head count on the mercenaries." Kathy knit her brows, staring pensively in the direction Ian had just gone, and then she turned and headed deep into the forest. Inside a narrow cliffside, the drake's voice echoed as it introduced, "This is my nest." Ian looked around the cavern, letting out a gasp of horror. Seeing this, the drake let out an angry roar. What's with that reaction? It's way too late for regrets now. Ian quickly threw his hands up in denial. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just checking the place out." Ian looked around with a heavy scowl. He was already exhausted, and using the Maronius language made him even more tired, with a face full of sheer exhaustion. He let out a heavy sigh, thinking, "Let's get this over with quickly so I can get some sleep. If I just push those protruding boulders back into the walls to smooth them out, it should open up the place a lot." Immediately after, Ian closed his eyes, quietly sensing the fluctuations of energy. After a moment, his lips moved slightly as he chanted the spell, "O Earth." The Earth energy manifested and asked, "Is it you again, human?" Ian looked straight ahead with a dead serious face. "I have a request." Her voice echoed back in flat refusal. "Not interested. I'm busy." Seeing this, he let out a silent sigh, thinking, "She really can't stand me." Seeing Ian open his eyes, the drake immediately pried, "How did it go?" Ian crossed his arms and replied, "Earth refuses to talk to me. I'll try again when she's in a better mood." Ian's brows knit tightly together, thinking, "I'll probably just get rejected again." Hearing this, the drake could only accept it. "Well, if Earth rejected you, there's nothing we can do." Ian blinked in surprise, unable to hide the shock on his face. The drake lowered its head with a look of utter disappointment. "Clearly, she is just not my soulmate. Thank you for trying your best for someone like me." Ian couldn't help but want to comfort the creature. The drake looked straight ahead and asked, "What is your mage name?" Ian's voice rang out in response, "Raven Eredes Ian." The drake extended a claw and said, "I am the long-tailed drake. Let's be friends from now on." Ian reached out and gently shook the claw, saying, "Longtail." The two firmly held hands, staring quietly at one another. A prompt flashed across the screen. New skill acquired, Drake summoning magic. You can now call upon your friend the drake for aid. If it is a request from a friend, he will gladly answer. Looking at the notification, Ian thought sadly, "I got the skill, but I can't believe I couldn't do anything for my friend." Suddenly, the drake's voice broke his train of thought, making him look over. The drake gestured with its arm, revealing a massive pile of treasures behind it. "To celebrate our new friendship, this is for you. Take as much as you want." Staring at the massive heap of gold and silver, Ian thought to himself, just like Master said, the dragon race loves collecting treasure. Looks like the relatives of dragons are no different. He reached down and picked up a sparkling gemstone, thinking, too bad. If Earth saw these gems, she'd probably listen to me instantly. Suddenly, he froze right on the spot. Ian blinked, a sudden realization hitting him. Wait, if I use this the right way? He immediately turned his head and asked, "Drake, mind if I draw a few lines on the ground? The Drake looked at him in total confusion, asking back, draw. After a long while, Ian stood quietly, staring down at the gemstone sitting right in the center of the magic circle. He pressed his lips together, thinking to himself, I almost forgot the method master taught me. Ian looked at the light radiating from the formation, thinking, if the arcane entity is throwing a tantrum, all I need to do is present an offering using a magic circle. The Drake stared over, completely baffled. What are you planning to do? Hearing this, Ian smiled and replied, just watch and see. Ian looked up cheerfully and shouted at the top of his lungs, O Earth. A voice echoed through the space in response. What is it, young human? He immediately roared out, shift the stones, smooth out the wall. A blinding light erupted from the gemstone, illuminating the entire cavern. Along with a faint blue glow, lines of ancient incantations continuously manifested in the air. The rocky walls began to crack, quickly receding backward. Sunlight from the outside poured into the interior through the newly formed openings. The Drake jumped in shock as the sunlight hit his face, his eyes going wide as saucers, completely unable to believe his ears. This is my nest. Looking at the incredibly luxurious cavern before him, Ian chimed in, it's a gift from me to you. The Drake cried out, his eyes glistening with tears of pure disbelief. Ian looked down with a proud smile. It looked like the creature was about to cry from pure emotion. He looked around the gorgeous cavern and screamed, it's so spacious, it's so beautiful. The Drake threw his head back and took a deep, heavy breath. It even smells good. He darted his eyes over to the side and asked, Ian, did you use magic to create this scent too? Ian immediately denied it. No. The Drake tightly grabbed Ian's hand with his claw, shouting, thank you, my friend. He lifted Ian clear off the ground, absolutely ecstatic. With this place, I won't ever have to feel embarrassed in front of her again. Even if we have hatchlings, they'll be completely safe here. Ian gasped and screamed, I definitely wasn't planning that far ahead. Ian gave a helpless smile and replied, well, as long as you like it, that's all that matters. After a moment, his feet finally touched the ground again. Man. Ian blankly touched his ear, lost in thought. What on earth is this? He quickly clamped a hand over his mouth, in utter confusion. Ian looked at the frantic face of the Drake, wondering why. The Drake let out a terrified shriek. Hey, are you okay? Is that blood? Watching Ian collapse onto the ground and black out, the Drake roared, Ian. Longtail grabbed Ian tightly, completely panicking. Buddy, wake up. Seeing Ian's face go a terrifying shade of pale made him panic even more, thinking, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Right at that moment, a voice echoed from the distance. Kathy came running up in a frantic rush. The moment he spotted her, Longtail's eyes went wide with hostility. She also looked up in utter terror. Kathy slammed on the brakes, her boots skidding hard against the dirt ground. Longtail gently set Ian down, and then he turned toward her, baring his fangs with a menacing roar. Kathy was trembling so hard her voice cracked a bit, but she still tried to stay calm, throwing her hands up to explain, wait, Drake, just hear me out. I'm Ian's friend, so please don't eat me, okay? Longtail tilted his head in confusion. Ian, friend. Right then, Ian stirred slightly next to them, letting out a soft groan. Both of them instantly snapped their heads over to look at him. His eyes were still tightly shut, his face contorted in pure agony. The sky gradually began to darken. Inside a small room, illuminated only by the flickering light of a candle, Ian finally slowly opened his eyes. He half-consciously flailed his hand around, his subconscious mind repeating over and over, what time is it? Where's my phone? Ian's hand suddenly brushed against something incredibly soft right next to him. Without opening his eyes, his groggy mind wondered, why is my phone so soft? Did the material turn into marshmallow or something? His fingers instinctively gave it a gentle squeeze as he thought, man, this is soft. Feels just like a cat's paw. Right at that moment, Kathy's voice rang out right beside him. Are you awake? Ian's eyes snapped wide open, and he bolted upright, stammering in pure panic. Kathy, why are you here? Am I still dreaming? This dream feels like I'm recording a video on my phone. Kathy looked incredibly worried and immediately urged, lie back down for a bit. Your head is still spinning. Sure enough, the next second, a massive wave of dizziness hit him, making Ian clutch his head. She quickly reached out a hand, asking, are you okay? Don't jump up so fast like that. He narrowed his eyes as the memories started rushing back. Oh right, I passed out. I overexerted my summoning level, trying to communicate with the Drake. Thinking of this, Ian slowly looked up at Kath, and then he immediately pulled his hood down to cover almost his entire face, panicking internally. Damn it, did she see everything? This is so embarrassing, I want to disappear. Once he calmed down, he looked around the room and asked, where's the Drake? She hesitated for a moment before answering. He suddenly left. Ian let out a sigh, deducing in his head, Did that guy go look for her? He scratched his head awkwardly, sorry for causing such a mess. Kathy looked at him gently and shook her head. Don't worry about it, I'm completely fine. Ian went quiet for a few seconds before remembering something else. By the way, how did you even get in here? Packed with a Drake around, shouldn't it have been almost impossible to get past? She recounted the whole thing seriously. I just told him I was your friend. He asked back, completely incredulous. How? In Moronius. Cassie looked at him, baffled. What's that? Ian's eyes went wide, thinking, what? Did she just barge in here using a translation app or something? But his exhaustion quickly caught up to him, making his vision blur. Man, I'm still so sleepy. Right then, Kathy seemed to muster up all her courage to speak. To be honest, I came here knowing exactly how dangerous it was. Mage Ian, there's something I need to tell you. The ambush last night happened because of me. Surprising, right? I'm so sorry for bringing trouble your way. Ian scratched his head awkwardly, and the air in the room suddenly grew heavy. He recalled how terrified she looked that day and thought, so that's why she was shaking like that. Ian cleared his throat slightly and knit his brows as he interrogated her. So you're connected to those bandits. I guess you're finally ready to reveal your true identity, huh? Kathy immediately fired back. No, what part of me looks like a bandit? Ian replied dead seriously. In fantasy tropes, a beautiful female bandit acting as the leader is a classic motif. Her face flushed red from a mix of anger and embarrassment, completely unable to find a comeback. Finally, Kathy just hung her head low and confessed in a quiet whisper, truthfully, this is a secret. I'm not Kathy. Hearing this, an image immediately popped into Ian's head of Kathy wearing a lavish gown, proudly declaring, I am the princess of a kingdom. While he casually muttered, oh really, his mind was already in complete overdrive thinking, don't tell me you actually are a princess. She explained with a serious look, my real name is Lucy, Lucy of the Tarian house. Those bandits were sent by my fiancé to kidnap. Ian stared at her, the words echoing in his head, fiancé. His eyes lit up as he thought, don't tell me this is just a lover's quarrel. Catching his weird look, Lucy immediately shot it down. What's with that look? It's not what you think at all. The truth is, I planned to run away as far as possible, so he'd never find me. But after what happened yesterday, I just don't have the confidence to survive on my own anymore. She grabbed his hand, her voice filled with desperate sincerity. So please, Ian, help me escape. Ian asked in utter bewilderment. No, wait up. What exactly are you running from? Did your fiancé do something terrible? Lucy explained thoroughly with a fearful look. The Tarian house is a barony that rules over the Fianlep territory. Because we lack serving knights, we've always been threatened by outside forces. At this rate, the Tarian family will be wiped out in a territorial war. Ultimately, my family betrothed me to a knight who happened to be a former mercenary captain. Because he was the captain of the most powerful mercenary group at the time, the forces targeting our family backed off. In the beginning, even he seemed satisfied with the status of being a baron's son-in-law. But then, he started abusing the power that came with the position. He began building a harem, treating me like a complete laughingstock. My parents couldn't take it anymore and demanded to call off the engagement. But that man poisoned my parents. As she reached this part of the story, Lucy's voice choked up completely. She sobbed and continued, because if the engagement was broken, he would lose all the power he gained, so he poisoned my parents and silenced all the servants. Ian scowled, cursing silently. This guy is an absolute monster. Lucy tried to compose herself and added, no matter how good he is with a sword, if he doesn't marry me, he's just a commoner. He can't inherit the Tarian family assets. That's why I ran away with the help of a servant. I'd rather kick the bucket than marry a guy like that. To ensure the marriage happens, he will definitely keep hunting me down. So please, Ian, help me escape safely. Ian fell into deep thought. This situation was incredibly severe. Acting alone was definitely going to be rough because some guy poisoned his future in-laws for power. And because of that, his fiancée was now facing the threat of kidnapping. This whole situation felt so incredibly convoluted, he didn't even know how to process it. I seriously cannot comprehend the mindset of these medieval rulers. Kathy kept gripping his hand tightly, her voice cracking. Please, I will definitely repay you. I swear on the honor of the Tarian house. Ian scratched his head in confusion. My point is, why me? What if I sell you out? She immediately explained, oh, because that guy is incredibly cheap. Even if you sell me out, he'd probably only throw a few silver coins your way. She pressed her lips together and continued, but as for me, I can give you everything. He repeated with a baffled expression, everything. Her voice rang out with absolute finality. Yes, if you want, I can even hand over the entire Tarian house to you. The room fell into dead silence. Ian stared at her quietly, his mind completely running wild. Does that mean I could even marry her? For a peasant's child to have a shot at becoming a quasi-noble is a genuinely rare opportunity, But if things actually go that far, what happens to Ian Ereddi's Raven, the disciple of the mage Ereddi's? Living like a noble and diving headfirst into politics wouldn't be a bad life, but since I've been born into a fantasy world, shouldn't I devote myself entirely to the pursuit of magic? By helping Lucy, I should be able to gain experience as a mage while earning some extra travel money. For now, I'll focus on driving back our pursuers and just let the rest fall into place. He cleared his throat and spoke up, honestly. You should ask someone who's better with a sword, because at the end of the day, a mage isn't a warrior. Terrified, Lucy's voice caught in her throat. Ian suddenly stood up straight, cutting her off. But if there's proper compensation involved, I will help you escape. As for whatever consequences come after that, you're on your own. Hearing this, Lucy covered her face and sobbed uncontrollably. He immediately panicked. Hey, why are you crying? Did I say something too harsh? I literally just said I would help you. She reached out and grabbed his hand, speaking from the bottom of her heart. Thank you so much, Ian. As she spoke, Lucy leaned against his shoulder, her tears flowing continuously. Ian remained completely silent, simply comforting her with a quiet, warm embrace. The sun gradually climbed higher into the sky. Longtail lay stretched out on the grass, a look of pure contentment on his face as he basked in the sunlight. A faint sound echoing from the mouth of the cave caused him to lift an eyelid and look over. The moment he saw Ian step outside, Longtail immediately called out cheerfully, "My friend, how are you holding up?" He nodded in confirmation. "I'm good," while muttering under his breath. He's totally trying to work on his tan just to look cool in front of her. Ian glanced up at the sky and suggested, "We should head down the mountain soon. Everyone is waiting." "Thanks for the gift." Longtail looked at him happily. "It's nothing special. Hop on, I'll give you a ride." Ian didn't hesitate for a second and climbed right up. "Thanks, Longtail." Lucy stood right beside them, watching the two of them with a completely blank stare. Contradicting his gentle demeanor from moments ago, Longtail snapped his head toward her and barked, "Hey, Ian's girl, you get up here too." Ian shook his head to stop him. "Hey, Longtail, it's not like that." The beast turned his head with a deeply confused expression. "It's not." Lucy stood frozen in place, her face a total question mark, wondering, what on earth are they talking about? While she was still completely bewildered, a hand suddenly extended right in front of her face. Ian leaned slightly toward her and said softly, "Climb on up behind me." Lucy gripped his hand tightly and climbed onto the back of the beast behind Ian. Seeing that both of them were safely seated, Longtail pushed himself up onto his feet, looking thoroughly excited. "All right, let's head out then." He gave his long tail a powerful flick and bolted forward like a gust of wind. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Andrian looked around anxiously and urged the others on. "Let's move, time to hit the road. You saw it yourself. Every single mercenary who came with us has been completely wiped out. If those bandits are still lingering around here, we're as good as dead too." Julian gritted his teeth and countered. But would bandits really just wander aimlessly through the woods? Besides, if they had any brains at all, wouldn't they have retreated by now? Still, duty called. Andrian immediately shot back. "People who become bandits don't have brains in the first place. They are absolutely going to hunt us down." The two argued back and forth for a moment before simultaneously turning around. "Sir Reek, what do you think?" Reek was currently sitting silently on a large boulder, his chin resting on both hands as if he were contemplating something incredibly serious. Suddenly his eyes snapped wide open. After a few seconds of silence, Reek delivered his conclusion, "Let's wait for the mate." Andrian furrowed his brows and questioned, "What?" Julian happily gave a thumbs up in approval. "As expected, we'll go with the guild leader's decision." Reek crossed his arms and smiled with absolute confidence, thinking to himself, he literally defeated a drake. There's no way he'd bite the dust here. He must have run into something that delayed him. They believed it without a shred of doubt, but a mere 10 minutes later they were ambushed by the bandits. With their faces swollen from the beating, they regretted it deeply, thinking, "We should have run instead of waiting." Connor raised a hand and warned, "Hey, cut out the crying. I'll make this quick." The other three wept like rain, trembling as they begged, "Spare us, we'll give you absolutely anything." Hearing that, the old man slowly sheathed his sword and began to negotiate. "In that case, hand over the girl." Reek froze instantly. The girl. Connor stepped right up to his face, his voice dropping into a menacing threat. "That's right. I heard there's a remarkably beautiful woman with blue-black hair. Stop playing dumb." Reek opened his mouth and stammered, "Be blue-black hair." Beside him, Andrian turned to him blankly and repeated, "A beauty." Right at that exact moment, both Julian and Andrian realized almost simultaneously that the person Connor was referring to was Kat. Connor looked down at the three of them again and demanded, "Where is she?" Looking around in a panic, Reek whispered, "Hey, find Cassie quickly. Julian searched frantically while trembling. Where did she go? A few seconds later, the three of them practically screamed at the exact same time. She's not here. Hearing that, the old man immediately drew his sword once more, his voice freezing cold. I see how it is. The three huddled together, sobbing as they pleaded, please spare us, Sir Maid. Right at that moment, the ground shook violently. The bandits turned their heads in a panic, looking around wildly. What the hell is that? Reek was so overwhelmed with emotion he nearly burst into tears as he shouted. The mage brought a drake with him. We're saved. Connor furrowed his brows in utter disbelief. A mage, a drake. A bandit standing behind him suddenly widened his eyes and screamed, Hey, over there. From the distance, Longtail was barreling toward them at a terrifying velocity. The old man narrowed his eyes, noticing the girl riding on the back, and wondered, isn't that the girl? The cohort beside him swallowed hard, his voice shaking, maybe. But isn't that thing she's riding right now a literal drake? Connor's face turned completely pale in an instant. He practically shrieked at the top of his lungs, run. Under the bright morning sunlight, an emotional voice rang out, I am so incredibly glad you're safe. Lucy looked at Reek, who had a black eye, as he raised a finger and said, it's a good thing you were with the mage. Otherwise, those guys would have definitely done something horrible to you. Lucy couldn't help but whisper, I think your face looks pretty horrible right now. With one hand on his hip, Andrian wondered out loud, how did those guys even know about Lucy? Standing beside him, Julian gasped in sudden realization. Come to think of it, the moment they arrived, they were looking for Kathy. Doing something like that under the Holy Angel Church is just crossing the line. Listening from behind them, Ian fell into deep thought over those words. The Angel Church. His gaze turned sharp as steel. It's been a long time since I last heard that name. Ian couldn't help but recall the world's largest religious organization, the Angel Church. Their doctrines strictly forbid turning believers into slaves, but human traffickers and slave traders have long discarded those commandments. Crossing his arms, Ian silently calculated his next move. More importantly, even after seeing a mage and a drake, those guys still refused to give up on Lucy. He stood still, staring at her figure nearby. Those hunters are incredibly persistent. Do they seriously want to force a marriage that badly? Thinking of Connor's group, Ian's entire face grimaced, thinking, this is bad. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before we're found out. Then he turned his head to the side. Longtail, can you do me a favor? The beast cast its eyes over and replied firmly, of course, just say the word. With one hand on his hip, Ian requested, I want you to drive all of those people away. If necessary, you can kill them. A bloodthirsty gleam flashed in Longtail's eyes. If it's a request from my friend, I am more than willing. He leaned over, watching the creature's back as it rapidly departed. Ian stood rooted to the spot, quietly processing everything. Of course, I didn't actually want to order a slaughter, but this is a medieval fantasy world where killing is entirely commonplace. If I want to survive in this world, I have to adapt too. Suddenly he flinched, letting out a painful groan. Ian reached up to support his head, thinking, I guess I used too much Maronius language again. Seeing this, Lucy immediately rushed over to support him, asking with deep concern, Ian, did you overexert yourself? Holding his head, Ian replied, I'm fine. She furrowed her brows and grumbled, you call that fine? With gleaming eyes, Reek stroked his chin, staring intently at the two of them. Watching their intimate interaction, he inquired, you two seem remarkably close. Are you guys dating? Afterward, Ian closed his eyes, resting inside the carriage as they departed alongside Reek's group. Sensing a sudden flash of light, his eyes snapped wide open. Ian looked at the notification screen, which read, your Drake has just killed another person. He fell into a startled contemplation. That makes 11. This automatic summoning magic report system is incredibly convenient, though it's a shame I can't summon him right in front of me instantly. He kept his eyes locked on the notification window floating before him. Suddenly, a voice called out in his ear, Ian. He answered softly, Longtail. On the other side, the beast unleashed a torrent of flames toward Connor's men and replied, I've chased off every single one I could find. Ian crossed his arms, a bright smile on his face. Thank you, you've been an immense help. Longtail chuckled as well, answering straightforwardly, as long as it makes my friend happy, that's all that matters. Within the canyon, his voice resonated. Do you have to leave? He replied calmly, yes. It's a shame, but it's time for us to say goodbye. Memories of their recent time together flashed through Ian's mind. Longtail couldn't leave the mountain range, so it was truly a pity they wouldn't see each other again. Lowering his head, Longtail spoke softly, thank you for everything. He looked up at the beast, likewise. Suddenly the creature looked down, an urgent expression on its face. Oh, right. Are you interested in the mystery of the Phoenix? Inside the city of Riverview, where a river split right through the urban landscape. Ian crossed his arms, unable to keep his thoughts from drifting. A phoenix. Longtail's words echoed in his mind. I heard there's an ice phoenix in the northern mountains. Why don't you go check it out? Ian quietly recalled the information regarding the creature. A phoenix is a bird that never truly vanishes, even in death. Not only is the legendary fire phoenix famous, but there are also ice, wind, and stone variants. They alter their forms depending on the environment and are universally known as monsters with an incredibly high capacity for adaptation. Ian furrowed his brows anxiously, wondering, I wonder if I can actually summon it. Beaming with smiles, Reek's group quickly ran over to him. Sir Maid. He extended a hand and inquired, We're about to meet with the Lord. Would you like to come along with us? Ian cast a glance to the side, contemplating. To ensure Lucy escapes safely, it's best not to draw the attention of high-ranking individuals like the Lord. Andrian also offered an enthusiastic suggestion. Kathy, if you don't have a place to stay, why don't you come with us? She looked around and shyly agreed. Immediately afterward, Lucy flinched as she felt Ian place an arm over her shoulder. Pointing a finger toward her, he announced, We will be resting at the inn before heading out. Julian and Andrian gasped, their jaws dropping in utter shock. Lucy's entire face flushed crimson as she stared intently up at Ian. She closed her eyes, leaning her head against his chest. I'm a little tired. Watching this unfold from behind them, Reek couldn't contain his excitement. So they really are. His face completely red, he crossed his arms and laughed out loud. They actually are dating. Hearing the loud laughter, the surrounding crowd turned to look over in confusion. Lucy smiled as she followed Ian, calling out, Pretending to date you is way more convenient. It keeps those annoying pests away. Still looking straight ahead, he asked, Is that so? Her cheeks blushing pink, she asked curiously, By the way, why do you use honorifics with commoner? Ian replied with a perfectly composed face, Because I am a commoner, I'm a farmer's son. Hearing this, Lucy questioned, But you're a mage now. Quickening his pace forward, Ian added, There's no special reason. I'm just copying my master. In his heart, he couldn't help but think, I want to become someone like master, friendly and polite. Hearing that, Lucy responded gently, her eyes still fixed on him. So, what are your plans for the immediate future? She followed up in a quiet tone. For now, I intend to go see the Count. With a dead serious expression, Lucy stated, He is my maternal uncle. If I explain the situation, I'm sure he will help. Ian turned his head back, feeling curious. It sounded like her mother and the Count were quite close. She raised her eyebrows slightly, casting her gaze in another direction. It shouldn't be too bad. Hearing this, Ian stared intently at Lucy. Unless she was absolutely certain of their close bond, it seemed a bit suspicious. He abruptly stopped, asking with concern, Aside from your uncle, is there no one else you can trust? Lucy immediately grew flustered. Wait, are you doubting my uncle? There is no one in this world more trustworthy than... Ian looked over with a perfectly calm expression. Is that so? Internally, he thought, if she says so, he must be a good person. Lucy reached out to adjust her collar, looking away. In any case, it's far better than relying on a complete stranger. Anyone else would definitely find a way to force me into marriage. Beaming with a playful smile, she leaned in close and teased, Of course, if an exceptional mage like you were to propose, I'd be absolutely thrilled. Ian looked away, thinking, and there she goes again. Immediately afterward, he looked back at her with a completely serious expression. Our contract ends the moment we meet the Count, understood. Placing her hands behind her back, Lucy complained, Isn't that a bit too cold-hearted? You have a noble literally offering to marry you here. Ian continued nonchalantly, There are plenty of other women in the world besides. Hearing this, she looked visibly annoyed, her cheeks puffing out. Next, her face flushing red, Lucy marched forward angrily. You jerk. Seeing this, Ian quickly chased after her. Hey, where are you going? The inn is this way. After a long while, the bell above the inn door jingled. The moment Ian and Lucy stepped inside, a welcoming voice rang out. He quickly walked up to the counter. We'd like to stay for a few nights and use the bathhouse. Ian placed a coin purse on the table and inquired, Is this enough? Leon looked at the gold coins inside the bag, her expression turning deeply respectful. It's more than enough. I'll get your room ready right away. Immediately after, she extended a hand and pointed toward Lucy, inquiring, By the way, will the young lady be bathing as well? She instantly crossed her arms over her chest, completely on guard. No need, thank you. Ian scowled and cried out, What's wrong? Don't tell me you think the water is dirty too. Lucy's face flared red. Well, that's part of it, but... She clutched the brim of her hat and cried out in annoyance. Do I really have to spell it out for you? Ian looked over in utter confusion, remaining dead silent. Then he recalled medieval bathhouses, which had absolutely no partitions or privacy. Upon realizing this, Ian froze right on the spot in complete shock. He looked at Lucy's embarrassed expression and said, All right, I'll go by myself then. Her face filled with exhaustion, she reached up and pulled her cloak down, honestly. Instantly, the men in the room darted greedily lustful glares right over at Ian's eyes flashed with a sharp light as he scanned his surroundings. He immediately barked out, "Lucy, pull your hood back up." She put her hands on her hips and stated haughtily, "Call me Kath." Ian rushed over, reaching out to pull Lucy's cloak back up. "Hurry up, everyone is starving." She adjusted her cloak, grumbling angrily, "Oh my God, what a pain." Henry and his crew nearby flashed a thoroughly malicious smirk. Looking inside the inn, the sound of gossiping voices echoed from their room. "Did you see that woman just now?" Philly spoke up, completely infatuated. "I have never seen such a beauty in my entire life." Even next to him rubbed his hands together eagerly. "She's an absolute angel descended from heaven." Henry thought of Ian's slender frame next to her and chimed in, "She's only got one guy with her, and he's just some weak, pretty boy noble." He flashed a wicked grin and suggested, "Why don't we take her for ourselves and have some fun?" Felix immediately chimed in loudly, "Sounds like a plan, but it doesn't look like they booked a room for a long stay." The corner of Henry's mouth twitched up, "Then we have no choice." Even cracked his knuckles from behind and roared, "We take her tonight." The next morning, inside a magnificent castle, an inquiring voice echoed, "So that's how it is, you want to do business here." Waltz rested his chin on one hand, waving them off. "Just do a good job and don't bring any trouble my way." Reek immediately dropped to his knees, thanking him respectfully. "Thank you very much, my lord." Kneeling on one knee on the ground, he looked up and thought to himself, "They say as long as I please the Baron, I might even get to enter this castle tonight." Suddenly, a brilliant idea flashed through Reek's mind. "Oh right, maybe I should tell him about the maid." Right after that, he bowed his head and called out loudly, "My lord Baron, there is something I must report." Hearing this, Waltz raised an eyebrow and inquired, "What is it?" Reek's eyes immediately lit up, filled with anticipation. "It's actually a secret, but out of my deepest respect for you, I simply cannot keep silent." Waltz was thoroughly pleased to hear this, reaching up to gently stroke his mustache. "Very commendable. Speak." Reek placed a hand over his chest, recounting sincerely, "The truth is, during my travels, I encountered a maid." He then began gesturing wildly with his hands as he explained. "The guy went like this, then whoosh, and then did this, saving us all." Waltz sat up straight, touching his chin in deep thought, truly remarkable. Suddenly, Reek raised a finger, his voice dropping low. "Now, don't be amazed just yet." He immediately clapped his hands together and added, "That very mage is currently staying at an inn right here in this town." Waltz's face instantly turned pale as death, and he gasped out in terror, "What?" Breaking into a cold sweat, he began packing restlessly. "This is bad. If a temperamental mage flies into a rage and unleashes a drake within my territory." Breaking into a cold sweat, he began packing restlessly. "This is bad. If a temperamental mage flies into a rage and unleashes a drake within my territory." Waltz imagined a terrifying scenario where Ian went mad, unleashing Longtail to burn and slaughter everything in sight, causing his expression to grow even uglier. No, the situation was bound to be even worse. Because right at this very moment, there was already a bunch of lunatics inside his territory. Waltz thought of the other group that had just arrived, the Holy Order of Santiago Knights. A crowd of zealots who took up weapons to serve God. They were both monks and warriors. Instead of fighting human wars, they hunted demons and monsters. The Holy Order proudly claimed to be the protectors of humanity. Waltz couldn't help but worry frantically. If that Santiago Knight Order and a mage who had tamed a drake crossed paths inside this territory. Waltz's entire face drained of color, his expression filled with pure anxiety. Immediately after, he barked out in a panic, "Commander." Kevin instantly placed a hand over his chest, responding, "Yes, my lord." Waltz raised a finger, pointing at Reek as he ordered, "Prepare a room for this man." Covered in a cold sweat, he added, "And summon the Santiago Knight Order immediately. Bring them to me before anything happens." Meanwhile, back at the inn, Ian and Lucy were having a meal in the middle of the main hall. Nearby, a heavily bearded man demanded angrily, "Where is my food?" A young girl, looking completely anxious, apologized, "I'm so sorry, I'll have it ready right away." Resting her chin on her hand, Leon let out a heavy sigh. "The bathwater isn't even prepared yet." Ian immediately stood up, "Let me handle it myself. I'm supposed to be helping out around here anyway." She asked back in surprise, "Are you sure? This is so embarrassing, especially while you're eating." He leaned in and whispered in Lucy's ear, "Just head upstairs as soon as you're done eating." Hearing this, she nodded, "Got it." The moment Ian stepped out, Lucy continued sipping her soup line by line. Henry, watching her sit all alone from behind, flashed a devious grin. A moment later, Lucy finished her meal and quietly walked up the stairs by herself. Clasping her hands behind her back, she skipped cheerfully toward her room. Suddenly, a hand shot out, grabbing Lucy's arm and stopping her dead in her tracks. "Hey there, lady." Henry looked at her, inquiring in a low voice, "Pardon me, but are you the companion of that black-haired young master who just went outside?" Lucy immediately yanked her arm back, demanding coldly, "Who the hell are you?" With a thoroughly sincere look, he placed a hand over his chest and replied, "I'm just a runner hired by him." Right after that, Henry flashed a gold coin and added, "He told me to take you down to the docks immediately." Hearing this, Lucy looked at him with intense suspicion. "I thought he went to draw a bath." The guy instantly defended himself. "Yeah, but it looks like something went down right behind the bath." Thinking of Graham's crew, her face turned pale and white. "Don't tell me those bastards tracked us all the way here." Henry immediately held out a hand, urging loudly, "There's no time, please follow me." Lucy quickly followed his lead to leave. "All right." She quickly ran down the stairs, right behind Henry. The front door of the inn was quickly pulled open. Terrified, Lucy hurried after his retreating figure as they walked away. Suddenly, she let out a sharp gasp and stopped dead in her tracks. Looking down from the high vantage point, Lucy saw Ian sitting by the courtyard below, watching over a boiling pot of water. Ian. At that exact moment, Henry raised a burlap sack high into the air from behind. Immediately after, the back door of the inn slammed shut tightly. Sitting in the courtyard, Ian suddenly heard Lucy's voice shouting out, "Ian." He turned his head back in total confusion. Ian watched in bewilderment as Felix came swinging a wooden club right at his head from behind. He immediately ducked his head, effortlessly dodging the attack. The old man instantly tripped over his own 2 feet. Ian looked at Felix, who had collapsed right next to him, letting out a pathetic groan. Scowling down at the man, Ian thought to himself, "Looks like these guys aren't her fiancé's elite henchmen after all. They're just small-time thugs." Seeing Ian look over, Henry and even immediately urged loudly, "Hurry up." Gritting his teeth, Ian glared at the 2 figures and prepared to give chase. Felix scrambled right back up, blocking the doorway. "Don't even think about running." Ian held his head and let out a heavy sigh. "Oh my God, what a nightmare." Frustrated, he cursed internally, "Because of this idiot, I lost their trail." Immediately after, streams of brilliant blue magic light manifested into the air. Watching the wave of magical energy surge past him, Felix shrieked in terror, "What the hell is that?" Ian closed his eyes, sensing the surging power around him as he thought, "With my current pool of strength, I can't just toss magic around carelessly. I need to sort through the arcane entities willing to lend me power and find one I can actually control." In the pitch blackness, the dark energy answered back, "Human, the light is fading. It's the perfect time to cause some mischief. Let's play together." Ian's eyes snapped wide open, thinking, this voice, darkness. Next, he threw a hand high into the air, roaring, "Oh, darkness." Felix screamed in sheer terror as he saw streams of dark aura erupting. "What is this?" Crouching down right where he stood, he shrieked frantically, "Why did it get so dark all of a sudden? I can't see a damn thing." Ian's eyes flashed with a brilliant crimson light as he fired back, "When I cast dark magic, I'm the only one who can see, you bastard." Immediately after, the sound of heavy blows echoed along with Felix begging, "Spare me." Suddenly, the distant sound of rapid footsteps approached as a group came running toward them. Ian snapped his head up, thinking, did this guy call for backup? He waved his hand, effortlessly dispelling the surrounding darkness. Ian looked down at Felix, who was slumped on the ground, and interrogated him. "Hey, where did you take?" The old man burst into a manic grin and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Look, I can see again." Ian swung a wooden staff, cracking Felix hard over the head as he barked, "Answer me, this utter piece of trash." Suddenly, a flash of white blurred right past Ian's face. He turned his head to look, finding a dagger buried deep into the wall behind him. Salvador stepped right in front of Ian, blocking him. "That's enough, young man." Ian's face grew dead serious as the old man interrogated, "That darkness just now, were you the one who summoned it?" Keeping his composure, Ian stared back at the group and replied, "Yes, I am the mage who summoned the darkness." Salvador led his men forward, their eyes locking onto Ian with intense gravity. Ian knit his brows in complete bewilderment, glancing at him. This bloodlust is insane. Who is this old man? His face battered and bruised, Felix knelt on the ground, begging Salvador, "Please save me." He reached out, clinging tightly to the old man's leg, and wailed, "That mage tried to murder me for absolutely no reason." Hearing this, Salvador gasped out, "What?" Upon hearing those words, Ian's entire body began emitting a dark aura as he glared down at Felix crying and clinging to the old man's leg. The corner of Salvador's mouth curled into a faint smirk. "So that's how it is." Clasping his hands behind his back, he stared directly ahead. If it's a mage we're talking about, then it's perfectly understandable. Under the afternoon sun, the pot on the stove was releasing thick plumes of steam. Ian lifted his head and asked in a freezing tone, "What exactly do you mean by understandable?" Salvador replied with absolute calm, Isn't that just how mages are? Holding his head high, he added coldly, people who simply do whatever the hell they want. Hearing this statement, Ian trembled all over from pure rage. Next, his gaze swept over the rest of the crowd, thinking, what does this old geezer think a mage is? Ian tightly gripped the hilt of his sword and roared, stop talking absolute garbage. His face contorted with fury, he raised a fist and screamed, that bastard attacked me first. Why would I just assault someone for no reason? Damn it. Immediately after, the entire area fell into a state of absolute, dead silence. Ian's entire body went completely rigid, a massive wave of panic hitting his chest. Oh crap. I lost my temper and screamed. If this old man gets pissed off and draws his sword. Suddenly, Salvador broke into a brilliant, radiant smile. Keeping his hands clasped behind his back, he stated, the way you speak, it seems you are indeed a capable mage. Derek stepped forward with a stern expression and added, however, that doesn't mean you are permitted to practice the dark arts. Ian's face immediately darkened, and he asked through gritted teeth, dark arts. Derek stepped right up to his face, declaring, exactly. Shrouding your surroundings in darkness means you are hiding from the sunlight, the eyes of the heaven. Crossing his arms over his chest, Derek smirked and let out a scoff. Hiding yourself in the shadows is a thoroughly cowardly act. Hearing this, Ian looked up at him, thinking, darkness is cowardly because it rejects the light. Huh. He stared blankly at the crowd before him, deducing, using this kind of religious rhetoric, these guys must be zealots from the Holy Church. Right after, Ian placed a hand over his mouth and let out a dry cough. Perfectly calm, he challenged them. Isn't the coexistence of day and night the absolute will of the heavens? If the divine will only resided in the light, then what does the night even exist for? Derek froze, stammering, well that. Ian pressed on, his voice booming right back at them. Just as the existence of the sun creates light, its absence creates darkness. That is a fundamental law of the heavens. It's not like I invented a law that doesn't exist. So what could possibly be wrong with utilizing it? His arms still crossed, Derek stood completely frozen on the spot. The followers standing behind him immediately crowded around, breaking into frantic whispers. After a long pause, one of the men pressed his lips together in silence, and then he broke into a wide smile and called out, he's right. Without permission from above, no one could possibly manifest darkness beneath the sun. The man next to him pumped a fist in agreement. I completely misjudged. This too must be the will of the heavens. Seeing this reaction, Ian lowered his head and muttered a silent curse. These medieval people are completely out of their minds. He raised his head to look at them, asking, can I leave now? My sister has been kidnapped and I have to go find her. Philly gasped out in utter shock. What, your sister? Upon hearing those words, Salvador's eyes flared with intense bloodlust as he glared down at the man. So the reason you assaulted this man was because you are an accomplice to the kidnappers. Ian darted a glance over. Yes. Covered in a cold sweat, Felix shrieked. No. Hanging his head low under that terrifying, murderous gaze, he stammered out an explanation. That's not. Salvador raised a hand and issued an order. Derek, you stay here and keep an eye on him. Derek placed a hand over his heart and replied, understood, master. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked right up to Ian. Young mage, I apologize for taking up your precious time. Salvador smiled warmly, extending a hand as he offered, let me lend a hand as compensation. Along the riverbank, Evan and Henry were desperately trying to row their boat away. Leading Salvador's group, Ian quickly caught up to the scene. A man pointed a hand toward the boat. That's the spot the witness mentioned. The man with the ponytail clenched his fist in rage. I can't believe those bastards are escaping by boat. The man beside him also roared in fury, cowardly scum. Ian cast his eyes toward them, falling into deep thought. The sun has already set, so traveling by boat is incredibly dangerous. In that case, suddenly a voice called out, catching him off guard, everyone. Ian turned his head in confusion. What's going on? Filled with intense passion, Salvador threw his fist into the air. For the sake of a stranger, let us pierce through this dark night together and launch the boats. The men behind him clenched their fists, shouting at the top of their lungs. The Knights of Santiago, protectors of the weak, are more than willing to accompany you. Ian turned his head toward them, contemplating. So they're knights, protectors of the weak. That actually sounds pretty cool. He held out a hand to advise them. Taking a boat out right now is exceptionally dangerous. Salvador beamed with a bright smile, waving his hand off dismissively. No need to be so formal, just speak casually. Ian froze right where he stood, but I always talk like this. The old man kept his bright smile. There you go again. Ian watched Henry's group as they began to coordinate. I just found a hook. I'm going to pull the boat closer. When I do, throw your hooks over to that side. Hearing this, Salvador gasped in utter astonishment. You're planning to pull the boat. Extending a hand, he asked in sheer bewilderment, don't you practice dark magic? How can you utilize water magic? With a perfectly calm expression, Ian countered, I have completed the novice level in several different elemental magic attributes. Salvador stared intently at him, his expression growing serious as he pondered. This is incredibly bizarre. The mages I've seen on the battlefield could only ever utilize a single element. His gaze turned sharp as steel, casting a glance behind them. Furthermore, if you're only at the novice level, shouldn't you be completely incapable of manifesting magic at all? Ian extended a hand forward and began to chant, O river, come to me. The knights watched in absolute awe as a brilliant blue light began to gather. The river water instantly surged upward into a violent swell, barreling directly toward the shore. Salvador's jaw dropped in complete shock, thinking, that goes far beyond any water magic seen on a battlefield. On board the boat, Henry felt the sudden pull of the current. What the hell? What's happening? Even, who was rowing the boat, was also startled. The current is. Immediately afterward, their faces twisted into absolute terror as they spotted a massive wave crashing directly toward their boat. Under the dim light of the setting sun, the boat capsized right in the middle of the river. The knights crowded along the riverbank, shouting rowdily as they watched the scene unfold. Right at that moment, a tearful Lucy rushed over and threw her arms tightly around him. Standing behind them, Salvador's eyes flew wide open as he demanded, What do you think you're doing? Can't you see your sister is crying? Ian immediately reached out and gently patted Lucy's back. You must have had a really rough time just now. She instantly buried her head in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Ian cast his gaze to the side, letting out a heavy sigh, thinking, we need to get back to the inn for a bath immediately. He stared out at the fading evening light, thinking to himself, but at that moment, I still had no idea that a peaceful bath in this world was something he would never be able to have again. Out on the streets, Bernard was riding his horse at a frantic pace, urgently clearing the path ahead. Loud shouts echoed through the air. Everyone, get back inside the inn immediately. Hansen stared at the white smoke billowing high into the sky. That smoke was undoubtedly from a battle. With a face full of anxiety, he urged his horse forward toward the source. Could the Lord's worries have actually come true? Hansen glanced over at Bernard riding beside him, sighing internally. This is a massive headache. Just managing this sheltered young master is enough to drive me crazy. He lowered his head, unable to do anything but let out a weary sigh. At the site where the white smoke was rising, a lively commotion echoed through the room. Let me scrub your back, sir. Then I'll handle this side. Sitting inside the tub of hot water, Ian answered, I'm perfectly fine on my own. Immediately afterward, the room door was violently thrown open from the outside. Bernard rushed into the room, demanding, What on earth are you doing? Ian looked up with a thoroughly blank expression, taking a bath. He and Hansen listened to those words, shouting back in absolute disbelief, a bath. Bernard stared at the steaming tub of water. In a place like this, citizens of the Empire rarely bathed unless it was a highly special occasion. His eyes flashed with a sharp realization. With the surrounding area in such a chaotic mess, something definitely went down. As the eldest son of the Lord of Riverview, I have every right to a full report. His face tense with excitement, Bernard stepped forward. Give me a proper explanation right now. Salvador bowed slightly, placing a hand over his heart as he replied with a smile, Lord Bernard, I am Salvador. Please, allow me to explain. Crossing his arms, Bernard asked, thoroughly annoyed, Why should it be you? I am questioning him. Hearing that, the old man gasped in surprise, Excuse me. Salvador lowered his head, explaining in a hushed tone, That is because the person over there is a mage. Bernard gasped in utter shock. A mage, what did you just say? Immediately following that, a sudden realization sparked in his mind. Is he actually planning to go through with it? Bernard placed a hand over his chest, demanding with pure arrogance, Mage, I am the rightful heir of the Kaltz family. Step out of that bath immediately and pay your respects to me. Ian instantly recalled a certain aristocratic custom in this world known as provoking a mage. To put it simply, it was an act where nobles deliberately provoked a mage to test their true capability. A mage who remained entirely composed under such provocation would be labeled as weak, whereas a mage who flared up in anger was considered truly powerful. Ian placed both hands on the rim of the bathtub, contemplating, Wait, is this that provoking a mage thing Lucy was telling me about? Crossing his arms, he looked down at the youth and flatly refused, No. Bernard's face immediately contorted as he screamed, You, what did you just say? Shaking from head to toe, he roared in pure fury, You dare defy me. Bernard stepped closer, yelling in absolute outrage, A mere nobody like you dares to stand against me. With a perfectly calm expression, Ian shot back, Why should I do anything you say? The young master immediately threw a tantrum, ordering his man, Hansen, drag that fraud of a mage out of there right now. Seeing Bernard being firmly held back by Hansen, Ian quietly praised him, thinking, not a bad performance. Then he let out a silent sigh. All right, if that's how it's going to be. Ian's eyes flashed with a chilling light as he asked coldly, a fraud, what did you just call me? Bernard stared at the swirling currents of light manifesting around the room, completely paralyzed with fear. What is the meaning of this? Ian raised a single hand high into the air. Every loose object in the room instantly levitated straight toward the ceiling. Bernard threw his hands up in a panic, hurriedly backing down. Stop. I've seen more than enough of your power. I sincerely apologize for my utter disrespect. In the blink of an eye, every single floating item crashed heavily back down to the floor. Ian let out a silent sigh of relief, stretching slightly as he thought. That should be enough to take him down a peg or two. He froze right where he sat as Bernard suddenly collapsed onto the floor, bawling like a baby. Ian's face went completely stiff as he stared blankly at the scene, thinking, oh, did I go a bit overboard? What if his family throws a fit and decides to execute me? The next day, inside the magnificent white castle of the Waltz family, brilliant morning sunlight streamed through the tall window. The Lord's voice resonated through the room. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Waltz recalled the sight of Bernard sobbing in the corner, speaking up. And I understand my son caused quite a bit of trouble for you yesterday. Looking thoroughly exhausted, he lifted his teacup and offered a sincere apology. Hearing this, Ian quickly followed up. No, I should also apologize for taking things a bit too far. Waltz looked over at him with a curious expression. By the way, I heard you have a companion traveling with you. Did you come here alone today? With a calm face, Ian replied, she has some matters to attend to back at the inn. Ian recalled the conversation before his departure, thinking, there's absolutely no need to let Lucy show her face here. Salvador had offered a cheerful guarantee. We are keeping an exceptionally close eye on your little sister. Inside the lavishly decorated room, the Count nodded. I see. He fixed Ian with a serious gaze, inquiring, if you don't mind, could I ask for the name of your master? Ian answered straightforwardly, it's Lady Aredes. Hearing that, Waltz gasped in surprise. I've heard tales of Drawld's rising star. Did your master head toward the south? Leaning back against the sofa, Ian confirmed, yes, because that's where the Magic Academy is located. Looking thoroughly astonished, the Count questioned, so she didn't travel toward the Palgar Duchy or the Roxland Duchy this time, correct? Ian's expression instantly tightened. What exactly do you mean by that? Waltz remained silent for a long moment before adding, things have been incredibly tense lately. Ian froze completely as the man's voice dropped, continuing, it appears the Palgar Duchy has set its sights on Roxland. Hearing this, Ian couldn't help but worry, thinking, that means war could break out at any moment. Waltz fixed him with a cool stare, inquiring, are you heading south as well? Furrowing his brows tightly, Ian denied it. No, I am traveling east in pursuit of the world's mysteries. The Count extended a hand forward. Since that is the case, please allow me to present you with a gift. Ian looked over, thoroughly puzzled. A gift. He stared at the securely locked wooden box resting on the table, wondering, what's inside? Pointing a finger toward the wooden box, Waltz instructed, open it up and see for yourself. Ian reached out and gently lifted the lid of the wooden box, peering inside, and his eyes instantly flew wide open in utter shock. This is a staff. Waltz's voice echoed as he explained, that is a staff once wielded by a high-ranking wind magus. Looking calmly at the box, he added, its name is the Windwalker. Ian stared intently at the weapon, instinctively repeating, the Windwalker. He immediately reached inside and grasped the staff. Seeing Ian take hold of the weapon, Waltz offered a warm smile. It suits you perfectly. He spent a few moments inspecting the weapon. It looked like an ordinary staff, giving him the distinct feeling of having just received a mage's starting equipment. The corners of Ian's lips pursed slightly as he thought happily to himself. Still, getting a present is always great. Waltz laughed out loud, crossing his arms. Consider it a token of my gratitude for overlooking my son's utter rudeness. Do you like it? Gently running his hand along the staff, Ian replied, yes, thank you very much, my lord. Inside the castle walls, Ian expressed his heartfelt gratitude. I accept this with absolute appreciation. Later that afternoon, a loud shout echoed right outside the inn. Ian. Gripping his new staff, Ian rushed outside in surprise. What's wrong? Her face pale with anxiety, Lucy reached out and grabbed his hand. It's an emergency. Her voice was filled with intense urgency. We need you. A short while later, Ian furrowed his brows in confusion. A crow. Salvador stepped closer and raised his voice. The hunters caught it this morning and were planning to eat it, but your companion stepped in to stop. Lucy let out a childish, giggling laugh. Your name is Ian Aredes Raven, and this is a literal crow. Don't you think that sounds like some kind of cosmic destiny? Hearing that, the look Ian shot her became noticeably more judging. Seeing him remain silent, Lucy squirmed playfully like a caterpillar. Come on, it's totally fate, right? Ian let out a sigh and coldly turned his head away. Sorry for the trouble. Go ahead and eat it. Her voice pitched up in complete dissatisfaction. Hey, you talk with absolutely zero consideration. The one who's a mage here is me, not you, right? What on earth are you even talking about? Waiting for that exact cue, Adrian immediately reached for the cage. Thanks for the confirmation. We'll have it for lunch then. But just as he turned to walk away, Ian suddenly heard a frantic shriek echo in his mind. Please save me, kind human. He instantly spun back around, shouting, hold on. Ian swiftly utilized his beast communication magic. What the hell are you? The crow, Oberon, was weeping and wailing hysterically. Please save me. Ian kept trying to communicate with it under the bewildered gazes of the onlookers. Answer me. What are you? But the creature merely repeated the exact same phrase over and over. Please save me. Witnessing this, he fell into deep thought. It didn't seem to comprehend the Moronius language. It likely lacked a high enough level of mystery, yet Ian refused to give up on trying to talk to it. Hey Crow, Oberon is currently screaming his head off like his house is on fire. Please help me, don't kill me. Even though he kept getting cut off, he remained patient. I will help you, so just shut your mouth first. However, failing to understand, the bird shrieked even louder, please come over here. Ian was thoroughly driven up the wall. In the end, he ended up shouting even louder than the bird. All right, I'll help you, so shut up. Only then did Oberon finally settle down and behave. Seeing this, a faint smirk tugged at the corner of Ian's lips, thinking, this guy might not understand my words, but he certainly understands the situation. Beside him, Adrian and Derek stared at him with pure admiration. Sir Mage, are you actually talking to that crow? That's incredible. Ian relayed its words. Yeah, it said it wants to be saved. For now, leave it with me. Hearing this, Lucy proudly patted her chest. See, I told you this crow wasn't ordinary. Sanvador offered the gentle smile of a wise elder. It appears the young lady possesses an eye for the mystery, much like yourself. Her chin lifted so high it practically touched the ceiling. Well, I've never studied it, but I must have a natural talent for magic. Ian could only roll his eyes in complete helplessness, thinking, and there she goes again. Afterward, he took Oberon away and began to bandage his wounds. Ian looked at the bird's goofy demeanor and smiled. They're all patched up right. Lucy kept her eyes locked on the crow. Yeah, it should recover in no time. Suddenly, her face fell into a sad expression. So, what are you planning to do with this crow? Give it back to the hunter. After going through all this, Ian couldn't bring himself to do that, knowing it would just end up as someone's dinner. As if understanding their conversation, Oberon suddenly hopped onto his hand, begging in a thoroughly submissive manner, please don't abandon me. The humans around here are absolutely terrifying. Oberon's tears began to stream down like a running faucet. Please. Ian's eyebrows practically knit together in annoyance, thinking, what a massive pain. Without saying another word, Ian simply placed Oberon onto his shoulder. Seeing this, Lucy's eyes instantly lit up. Are you taking it with us? He gave a slight nod. Strictly speaking, I'm just keeping it temporarily, at least until it fully recovers. She grew incredibly excited again, just like a child. Then we have to give it a name. Having not given it any thought, Ian blanked out for a moment. Lucy leaned in closer, happily suggesting, how about Obsidian, since its eyes are pure black? Looking at the crow's thoroughly infatuated expression toward her, he could only sigh helplessly. This bird was practically in paradise just from getting Lucy's attention. However, being too lazy to memorize a long name, Ian immediately corrected her. Too long. Let's just go with Oberon. Merely thrilled about having a new companion, she agreed wholeheartedly. Sounds good. He reached out and gently patted Oberon's head. From now on, your name is Oberon. The next second, the bird suddenly flapped its wings and squawked arrogantly. Hurry up and present your offerings to receive my divine grace. Ian's eyes made absolutely no effort to hide his sheer disgust, thinking, look at him acting all high and mighty all of a sudden. I guess he's happy. Out of nowhere, Lucy spoke up with a suggestion. Oh, right, Ian. I was thinking maybe we should travel along with the knights. He fixed a steady gaze on her. The knights. It was clear she was feeling a bit anxious about the journey ahead. I think it would be much safer than traveling alone. Ian immediately pictured the burly, heavily built figures of those men. It made sense. Bandits wouldn't dare launch an attack easily. But what if they aren't heading in the same direction as us? As if sensing Ian's hesitation, Sanvador pushed the door open and stepped inside. What are you worrying about? He was startled backward, blurting out, Elder. He sat down right across from Ian, saying, even if you are a mage, traveling alone with a woman is still dangerous. Why don't we make a deal? Ian asked, a bit confused. A deal. A gentle smile crossed his face. Exactly. The truth is, we are currently on our way to eliminate a monster that has appeared within the Baron's territory. Hearing that word, Ian instantly tensed up. A monster. Sanvador's voice dropped to a noticeably dark tone. Are you familiar with the creature known as a manticore? It's a monster shaped like a giant lion. The manticore is a beast notorious for being incredibly brutal and bloodthirsty. Ian had a vague idea of what the old man was getting at. Yeah, don't tell me you want me to go hunt a manticore with you guys. But Salvador shook his head in denial. No, we have no intention of dragging you into danger. Of course, if you're willing to help, we certainly won't turn you down. After listening, Ian went silent for a long time. A moment later, he suddenly stood up from his chair. And just like that, he rolled his eyes and started to walk away. Then I decline. Salvador let out a chuckle, quickly gripping Ian's shoulder to hold him back. At least hear me out first. Ian sat right back down in his seat. Fine then. Salvador slowly began to explain their background. Actually, we are a night order established by a sect of the Holy Church. However, when we mentioned we were going to hunt the manticore, a dark shadow of sorrow crossed Salvador's face. It seems the priests in the Count's territory forced a certain mage to assist us. That probably rubbed them the wrong way. So we want you to step in and mediate with that mage for us. A mage's words will hold a lot more weight than a knight's. Hearing this, Ian just lowered his eyes, lost in thought. This wasn't a bad deal at all. As long as he coaxed that other mage, he'd get a whole night order to escort. After weighing his options for a bit, he finally agreed. All right, let's go together then. All right, let's go together then. This might have been the smartest decision Ian had ever made. Traveling with the Night Order was incredibly comfortable. The members of the Santiago Night Order were all genuinely good people, and they were strong enough that Ian didn't even have to lift a finger, leaving him completely stress-free. But if he absolutely had to find something to complain about, while Ian was happily munching on some barbecue, Derek suddenly raised his voice. Lord Mate, would you be interested in studying the Holy Scriptures? The other two knights immediately chimed in eagerly. Let's study together. Count me in too. But of course, Ian flatly turned them down. No, thank you. The three of them cried out in unison. Why the hell not? He didn't even bother to pay attention, focusing on his food instead. Even though it was a comfortable ride, these guys just kept trying to drag him into their religion. Salvador let out a few chuckles and sat down across from Ian. That's a real shame. Chewing his meat, Ian asked in confusion, what is? The old man had seen Ian's potential early on. If you were up for it, you could have easily become a priest for the order. Hearing that, Ian fell right back into deep thought. The voice of a god, huh? If I really could talk to a god, maybe I could ask why the hell I got reincarnated and find out more about this status window. After thinking it over, Ian walked right up to Derek. Sir, can I join in on studying those holy scriptures after all? The entire night, the man taught Ian with absolute patience and care. See letter 1 EADU studied with intense focus, seemingly completely tireless. Right around then, a gentle voice echoed out, speaking in an incredibly pleasant tone. Ian didn't even bother to look up. Yeah, thanks for the compliment. Hearing this, Derek's eyes went wide with surprise. Where did that come from out of nowhere? Ian had absolutely no clue what was happening either. You just said I had a good attitude. The man looked scared out of his wits. I didn't say a single word. Did you just hear something? Ian figured he was just hallucinating from a lack of sleep, but he had definitely heard someone speak. Right at that exact moment, a thought flashed through his mind. That was not a human voice. That same voice rang out again, carrying a teasing hint of amusement. Who knows? Ian suddenly bolted upright, giving Derek quite a fright. The voice kept echoing inside his head. Could it be that I'm not exactly what you'd call a human? Ian pointed a finger straight up at the sky and roared, You're a god, aren't you? A massive vortex swirling above suddenly spoke up. I suppose so. He ground his teeth in pure frustration, completely speechless. You. Ian refused to back down, firing off question after question. What is that status window supposed to be? Why did you reincarnate me into this world? But the only response he got was a wave of mocking laughter echoing through the air. Utterly furious, he roared with every ounce of strength in his body. Answer me. Suddenly, a beam of brilliant blue light shot down, piercing right through Ian's body. Following that flash, the sky instantly cleared up, returning to exactly how it was before. His face clouded over as he realized something was terribly wrong. Don't tell me. Ian felt his head spin, a massive wave of emptiness washing over him. You really just dipped on me, didn't you? He snarled so hard the veins popped right on his forehead. Hello. Getting absolutely no answer, Ian jumped up and down in pure rage. Hey God, get your ass back here right now. The soldier next to him quickly held him back, saying, Whoa, hey. While Ian was still throwing a wild tantrum, the other soldiers piled in to restrain him. Please just calm down. He poured himself into studying the Holy Scriptures like a maniac, all just so he could get another chance to talk to that absolute jerk of a god. And as a result, he ended up unlocking a brand new skill, Holy Magic skill, the ability to converse with the elegant, noble, divine, gorgeous, and absolute ruler of this world. Well done, Ians. And the punishment followed immediately after. Show some respect to your God, study more, and understand him better. The more devotion you show, the happier he will be. The elegant, noble, divine, and gorgeous ruler of this world. Tears streaming down his face, Ian slammed the book shut, thinking, is this really the God who granted me this skill? Did the creator, or whatever the hell you want to call him, just throw me into this world to sit back and mock me? Ian got absolutely no answers, leaving him to do nothing but curse like a sailor. He wanted to confront the god directly, but his holy magic level was way too low to initiate a conversation. He stood up, realizing there was nothing he could do for now. Then Ian quietly left the area thinking, I need to track down more arcane entities and level up my holy magic. A few days later, the non-stop sounds of brutal combat began echoing through the forest. By this time, our protagonist's group was locked in a fierce clash with an unknown group of enemies. Right at that moment, Salvador swung his sword, cutting down an intruder. With just a single, swift strike, the guy collapsed cleanly to the ground. Drenched in blood, the old man darted a quick glance over at the people nearby. Hey, rookie mage, everything good on your end? Ian timidly raised a hand, his voice barely louder than a squeaking fly. Yes, sir. But looking at the wounded bodies scattered all over the ground, a wave of pure terror surged in his chest. Of course, everything was fine, considering you guys just completely obliterated. Salvador looked over at Lucy, who was stammering right next to him. Are you hurt anywhere? She stuttered nervously. I'm fine. But what about the elder? Seeming to read right through Ian's anxiety, Salvador offered some comfort. No matter how old I get, I'm not going to lose to garbage like this. Feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted off his chest, Ian spoke up easily. I heard you used to be a mercenary back in the day. That's incredibly impressive. Holding the hilt of his sword firmly, the old man replied with total confidence. I might look like this now, but I was actually pretty famous in my youth. Then Salvador gave a powerful swing of his sword, looking imposing. That's why I go by the title of Elder. There are way too many idiots out there who just look at my name, judge me, and try to pick a fight. Ian's gaze darkened as he fell into deep thought. So he's famous enough that literally everyone recognizes his name. Salvador raised his sword high with a triumphant look on his face. We have eradicated the evil bandits. The soldiers under his command immediately joined in, cheering and roaring with pumped-up morale. Hansen took the lead, pointing out the way. Master, the path splits into two up ahead. He seemed to be incredibly familiar with this particular route. The eastern path led straight to the Count's castle, while the western route headed into the forest where the manticore had been spotted. Salvador pointed toward a section of the woods. The place where that mage lives is down this way. Then he waved his hand to call the group over. Let's move, Ian. He suddenly hesitated, asking for a brief delay. Please wait a moment. Then he turned to Lucy, who was standing timidly beside him. Lucy, let's go meet this mage first before we head over to the Katina territory. But she flatly refused. No, I'm going to head out first. A look of worry washed over Ian's face. Are you going to be okay on your own? To put his mind at ease, she gave a bright smile and quickly turned to leave. I'm not a child, you know. Taking this route will get me to my uncle's place in no time. Lucy even gave a cheerful wave. See you later. Ian watched her retreating figure, his heart still tightly gripped by anxiety. Is she really going to be fine? Keeping his eyes locked on Lucy, he muttered to himself, I need to wrap this up quickly and go after her. Suddenly noticing Lucy was gone, Salvador asked, where did your sister go off to all by herself? Ian replied casually, just for a bit, I'll catch up with her shortly. Ian immediately shifted the topic to something else. More importantly, we're about to meet that mage, right? Slouching an arm over Ian's shoulder, the old man gave a mischievous grin. Are you mentally prepared? Ian scowled in annoyance. Mentally prepared. Salvador's smile completely vanished, his voice taking on a serious edge. Mages are notoriously temperamental, aren't they? They're already pissed off at the church, so there's no telling what kind of crazy stunt they might pull. Ian darted a sharp look over at him, interrogating. Why the hell do we have to clean up the church's messes anyway? Salvador's face went completely pale, a wave of guilt making him sweat bullets. He scratched his head frantically, looking away guiltily. Well, because we already accepted the money from the church, so. Ian couldn't help but praise them silently. No wonder every single one of them is wearing such nice armor. The old man squeezed his shoulder like they were best buds, but we're not going to die out there. I'm sure they'll show us some mercy out of respect for you. Ian went quiet, turning things over in his head. This was his first time meeting another mage besides his master, and he had no idea if things would go smoothly. Meanwhile, inside a certain house, hidden deep within the forest, the silhouette of an elderly mage was quietly preparing some herbal concoctions and stews. It looked absolutely delicious. This was the witch Manny Campbell, a grand magus of the wood element. She recalled how a group of knights had shown up at her place not long ago demanding assistance, with Damien and his lackeys barging in out of nowhere. Mage Manny, please assist our knight order in eliminating the manticore. His eyes had been completely radiating a murderous aura. Please do not forget, this is an official request from the Holy Church. Manny bared her gums, showing off the few teeth she had left, honestly. She kept continuously stirring the pot. If you want my help, the least you could do is eat the food I cook and look like you're actually enjoying it. Following Salvador's lead, they arrived at a house buried deep inside the forest, an apothecary. He confirmed with a faint nod. Yes, Manny Campbell is a highly renowned apothecary. The reason behind it is quite simple. Not only can she manipulate plant life, but she can also brew incredibly terrifying potions using plant toxins. Reaching this point, Salvador gave a cautious warning. Since we need a potent poison to hunt the manticore, it works out perfect. Suddenly, an incredibly pungent aroma hit their noses like a truck. What the hell is that smell? Ian froze for a split second in utter surprise. Wait, this scent was coming from right inside that small cabin in the woods. The aroma kept drifting out into the air, and right then, a living, breathing Manny Campbell manifested with a piercing, cackling laugh. I've been expecting you, warriors of Santiago. Salvador knit his brows slightly at Manny Campbell's intense, welcoming display. Manny casually threw out an invitation. I'm thrilled you guys made it. She gestured toward a pot of meat stew sitting on the table. Come, enjoy the feast I've prepared for you. A moment later, Ian's group managed to step inside Manny's house. Everyone was served a bowl of stew that gave off a thoroughly repulsive odor. Man, this smell is way too strong. Salvador still refused to take his hand away from his nose. There's really no need to prove your strength to us in this manner. She let out a sigh as if trying to justify herself. I'm simply treating my guests to a rare dish made from plants my husband poured his heart into cultivating. But the next second, she threw out a blatant provocation. And if you're not my guests, you're free to leave. These words instantly left the old man completely tongue-tied. On the other side of the room, Lucy had to literally pinch her nose just to take a single spoonful. Male sitting next to her could do nothing but stare blank. Out of nowhere, the guy couldn't hold it in any longer and gagged up a storm, a display that was fully witnessed by man. Did I perhaps go a little overboard with the seasoning? That thought suddenly snapped to a halt as her eyes locked onto Ian. Wait a minute, why is that kid eating so much? He's eating like he's never tasted anything this good before. Who the hell is this kid, chugging down a whole bowl of soup packed with raw garlic like that? Driven by sheer curiosity, Manny quickly walked over to investigate. Are you doing okay? Ian didn't forget to grab a chicken drumstick while his eyes lit up with joy. This is amazing. Her mind went completely blank for a second upon hearing those words. Amazing. A massive wave of existential doubt immediately surged in her chest. There's no way. He picked up a whole, unpeeled clove of garlic and marveled. Seriously, especially this garlic, it's incredibly delicious. Right after saying that, Ian popped it straight into his mouth. Everyone watching completely froze in absolute shock, including Manny. She rushed over, grabbing his shoulders tightly and screaming at the top of her lungs, "Stop it right now. I've been an apothecary for 40 years, and I have never seen a freak quite like you." Ian blinked his eyes wide with a perfectly blank, clueless look. A freak. Manny crossed her arms, her gaze turning intensely scrutinizing. What's your name anyway? Keeping absolutely nothing hidden, he directly stated his full name, Ian Eredes Raven. Hearing that name, she gasped in pure horror. Eredes. Manny's finger trembled violently as she pointed it straight at Ian. She emphasized every single syllable with absolute clarity. Does that mean you are the disciple of the flame mage Eredes? And so the story was recounted over and over until the curtain of night fell across the sky. Please forgive me for testing you like that. Manny's tone grew noticeably softer. As an apology, please eat as much as you like. Ian cast his eyes over at the plate of food neatly laid out on the table. This chicken stew really is fantastic. Right then, she brought up the main topic. So, you guys are planning to hunt the manticore. One of the men confirmed. That's right. Manny's expression instantly turned heavy. It's not going to be easy. She shared a highly reliable piece of intel. The Baron already sent hunters to capture the manticore, but every single one of them was slaughtered by that monster. To her surprise, Salvador remained completely unyielding. I've already braced myself. Manny fired back with a question. Have you ever actually hunted a manticore before? He replied in a low tone. A few times back in my youth. She then turned her attention toward Ian. What about you? He was caught a bit off guard. Manny narrowed her eyes slightly in a dangerous glare. Being raised by Eredes, I assume you must already be a highly accomplished mage, right? She threw out a heavy suggestion. why don't you contribute some of that wisdom to the Night Order? A sudden fragment of memory came rushing back into Ian's mind. What a mage ought to do. A voice echoed out an explanation. That's right, every mage will eventually have to interact with other people, even if they don't want to. Eredes gave a faint smile as she instructed him. You must absolutely never take that moment lightly. Snapping back to reality, he found himself quite conflicted. Of course, he didn't need to go hunt the manticore himself, but if he refused, it might spark nasty rumors within the Mage Guild. Because the Mage Guild, an organization established by mages and spearheaded by the Magic Academy, existed to ensure the proper utilization of the arcane. The more Ian thought about it, the rougher it felt. If word got out, he wouldn't have the face to see his master, and he might not be able to call on other mages for help when he needed it. He darted a quick glance over at the group, standing beside him. Every single one of them was looking at Ian with absolute trust. Fine, guess I have no choice. And so he quickly came to a decision. I'll tag along with you guys. The following day, a strange, eerie quiet hung over the entire forest. Salvador and Ian led the charge, pushing deeper into the thick woods. The air was thick with tension. Lucy is probably waiting for me. I just hope she's doing okay. Right at that moment, Oberon flapped its wings, flying back to report. Master, I found it. It perched right on his shoulder and added, the manticore is right over there. Standing beside him, Salvador looked slightly anxious. Is something wrong? Ian pointed at Oberon before replying. According to this guy, it's this way. By now, Salvador was looking at the creature in a completely different light, thinking, his capabilities are truly astonishing. Meanwhile, Ian glanced at Oberon as the bird chirped away. When it perched on my shoulder, I used necromancy and summoning magic to get it accustomed to human language. It all happened in the blink of an eye. They continued to follow the path that Oberon had indicated, with Ian nodding. I can sense an incredibly strong killing intent. Out of curiosity, Ian suddenly spoke up. Elder, may I ask you something? The man casually replied, what is it? The youth quickly put forward his question. If the manticore is a monster as well, is it completely impossible for me to persuade it? After pondering for a moment, Salvador merely replied with 2 words, hard to say. Manny piped up at that moment, adding, a manticore isn't the type of creature you can reason with. With a serious expression, Ian teased, what does Manny even know about summoning magic? She grew so enraged she practically leaped into the air, shouting, I'll have you know I completely understand what the mystery is. With that, Manny threw out a threat. If you actually manage to persuade it, I am going to tell Eredes. However, that statement completely defied natural logic, making Ian think. Instead of praising me, she's going to go tattle to my master. Right at that moment, Derek called out loudly, Master, on the other side. The entire group immediately cast their eyes in the exact same direction. What met their eyes was the raw killing intent radiating from the manticore's glowing eyes. Over there, Salvador and the others peered deep into the forest as the beast stared right back. Ian felt a bit tense. Salvador continued to instruct them, you two stay close to me at all times. Manny quickly replied, understood. Master, abrupt call caused Salvador to whip his head around. A soldier stepped right up to him and informed, I have coated all of our weapons in poison. The man then presented 3 arrows drenched in a specialized poison formulated by man. In the very next second, Salvador decisively loosed the 3 arrows deep into the forest. Ian watched the scene unfold, falling into a quiet contemplation, completely unreadable. The arrows whistled sharply as they tore forward through the air. Suddenly, Ian felt a prickling sensation shoot through his entire body, and his eyes rolled back, turning completely white. The moment the arrows struck the manticore's hide, they deflected right back off. Ian stepped forward to inform them. The arrows struck its neck and bounced off. Salvador said in sheer bewilderment, that's impossible. The soldier asked in a panic, Master, what should we do now? Attack again, he ordered. The shadow manticore stepped out into the open, its eyes flashing brilliantly as it let out a sinister laugh. Ian stared at the creature as a wave of terror washed over his heart, thinking, that laugh is giving me literal goosebumps. At that moment, he realized the manticore was already right in front of them, leaving absolutely no time to reapply the poison. Ian clenched his fists tightly, thinking, looks like there's no other choice. In the blink of an eye, his entire demeanor turned incredibly ferocious, and he let out a savage, aggressive roar. Everyone standing behind him froze in place, utterly stunned and unable to comprehend what was happening. Manny stared at Ian's back and exclaimed in awe, that kid actually pulled it off. Right before their eyes, the manticore stood completely motionless in silence. A moment later, it took a slow step forward and offered a sneering compliment. To think a human actually has the guts to strike up a conversation with me. Quite rare. Hearing this, Ian felt a bit tense, reassuring himself. All right, just stay calm like before. He extended a hand and said, "I'm glad you can understand me. I am Ian, a maid." However, the manticore callously barked back, "Beat it." Those words left Ian utterly dumbfounded, his entire body freezing up. In the very next second, the manticore showed zero respect and hurled excrement directly onto Ian's head, snarling, "Eat it, you foolish human." Ian stood there completely paralyzed, his expression darkening heavily. He couldn't restrain himself from snapping, "What is wrong with you? Who do you think you are?" The manticore nodded in smug satisfaction. "Now that's more like it. Drop that respectful tone." Furrowing its heavy brows, it demanded in a harsh tone, "What is it you want from me?" Ian also grew tense, as the manticore continued to speak standard imperial language. At this point, Ian didn't hesitate to point a finger directly at the beast and declare, "Hand over your head." Following that, nothing could be heard but the manticore's ecstatic laughter echoing through the deep forest. Amused by Ian's bewildered expression, it offered an appreciative praise. "You're exceptionally straightforward, I like that." In the blink of an eye, the manticore bared a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth and proposed, "Mage Ian, why don't you team up with me to harvest the corpses of these humans?" Those words caused Ian's eyes to pop wide open in utter shock. "What?" The manticore drifted into a bloodthirsty delusion. "I will feast on the flesh." It painted a picture of debauchery for Ian, "while you will have all the gold, silver, and women." The beast continued in a chilling voice, "Once you grow tired of the women, I will slaughter them." Finishing its sentence, it licked its chops disgustingly. "It will be remarkably entertaining." Hearing that, Ian was thoroughly speechless, muttering, "Unbelievable." He then spat on the ground right at the manticore's feet in pure disgust, making a repulsive sound. Not stopping there, Ian thrust his middle finger right in front of the manticore's face, cursing, "You bastard." The soldiers witnessing this display looked entirely bewildered by his action. At that moment, the manticore reared back up to its full height and said coldly, "Very well." And with that, it lunged straight at Ian in a split second. Flying into a vicious rage, the manticore roared savagely, "Killing you will be thoroughly rewarding." Ian was momentarily stunned, only having enough time to process the imperial language. Only then did Manny issue an order to strike. She stomped her foot heavily against the ground, causing a radiant sprout to instantly burst forth from the earth. Within a fraction of a second, robust wooden branches rapidly erupted from the young shoot, completely entangling the manticore. Salvador narrowed his eyes, observing the situation closely. After a brief moment, he watched as the creature was thoroughly swallowed up by those sturdy branches. Seeing this, Salvador barked in anxiety, "Manny, what on earth did you just do?" Manny replied nonchalantly, "Are you blind? I've completely consumed the manticore." Salvador continued to press her, along with the knights standing nearby. Despite feeling a bit flustered, Manny stubbornly dug her heels in. "Get serious. We're not children anymore. Deal with it yourself. Killing and consuming the manticore is the absolute priority." Suddenly, Salvador spotted something that caused him to look up in shock. He began to move his feet and then broke into a full sprint toward the interior. Ian called out in confusion, "Elder, wait up." Reaching the location, Salvador asked anxiously, "Hey, is everyone all right?" Ian managed to catch up at that exact moment, drenched in sweat. The soldiers stammered in response, "We're okay." But suddenly, Ian's eyes flew wide open in absolute horror. Derek lay on the ground, his body covered in severe wounds and wrapped in bandages from head to toe. The soldiers continued weakly. As for Derek, Salvador rushed over to support him. Derek struggled to squeeze out each word. "I am sorry, master. We let the manticore get away." But Salvador immediately scolded, "What are you talking about?" This scene struck a deep chord within Ian, his lips tightening firmly. As his hands instinctively clenched into fists, Salvador's reassuring voice continued to echo, "You guys did your absolute best." Ian recalled Derek's highly honorable moments, sighing heavily to himself. "I never imagined I would witness death firsthand like this, let alone that it would be Derek." Now the reality of it was truly sinking in. Images of the rampaging beast filled his mind. This is a world where monsters and warriors are an everyday reality. They leave everything engulfed in a sea of flame. The concept of death, which I had only ever read about in stories, has now materialized as a grim reality right before my eyes. After contemplating for a long moment, Ian quickly stepped toward the group. He knelt down, took hold of Derek's hand, and called out softly, "Derek." Ian offered a warm smile, recalling words from the past. "You told me this when you were teaching me the Holy Scriptures, didn't you?" Beneath the vast expanse of the open sky, Derek's voice had resonated solemnly. "Believe from the very depths of your heart and pray, and the heavens will open up." Hearing those words, tears streamed down the man's cheek. A moment later, a mystical light began to envelop the area around them. "Let us pray together." Ian lowered his eyes slightly, murmuring under his breath, "Almighty heavens, are you watching?" Kneeling beside Derek, he continued to mutter, Your most devoted believer is right here. He's dying. Aren't you going to do something about it? Suddenly, a brilliant ring of light manifested out of nowhere and spoke. Your sky is right here, Ian. Before Ian could comprehend what was happening, the sky continued with a proposal. If that is what Ian desires, let's give it a try. In an instant, the ring of light in the air burst into a blinding radiance that illuminated the entire horizon. Witnessing this display, Salvador called out with a smile, Ian. The scene shifted to the front of a magnificent palace, where Derek suddenly materialized. A deep, sweet, and soothing voice entered his consciousness, saying, "Wake up." A miraculous light enveloped the goddess. She slowly extended her hand forward, as if wanting to cradle him. Derek's eyes went wide in utter astonishment as he muttered, "What a goddess." His mind swirled with endless thoughts, thinking, "It is so wonderful to see you." Yet the more he looked, the more Derek trembled in sheer disbelief. Why is a goddess here? Does this mean this is the heavenly realm? Sensing the anxiety within him, she closed her eyes and gently instructed, "You still have work to do." Derek quickly sat up, entirely bewildered. "Work I must do." The goddess gently extended her arm amidst the shimmering light, guiding his path. "Spread my will even further. Aid the weak and bring happiness to their lives." Derek's eyes popped wide open in absolute shock at her next words. "And assist my apostle, Ian." A brilliant flash of light gradually materialized before his eyes alongside her final message. "That is my divine will." In the very next second, Derek snapped awake from the dreamlike vision. His vision blurred, his eyes squinted as he gradually recognized the familiar faces. Salvador called out his name in sheer astonishment. "Derek, you're awake." Drenched in fresh blood, Derek sat up in a complete panic. "Where on earth am I?" While he was still entirely dazed and disoriented, a voice echoed from a distance, calling his name. Derek. Clutching his staff, the corners of Ian's lips tugged into a playful smirk as he teased, "How does it feel to come back from the dead?" The moment he saw the youth, Derek couldn't restrain his emotions and rushed forward with tears streaming down his face. Ian was startled backward by the sudden advance, stammering, "What the hell are you doing?" The man fell to his knees at Ian's feet in pure gratitude. "Lord Ian, you saved me according to the will of that magnificent entity, didn't you?" He glanced down at the kneeling man, feeling a bit awkward, though in truth Ian couldn't entirely deny it. "Well, I was only able to utilize holy magic, because the goddess of the angel church lent me her power, so what he's saying isn't completely wrong." Therefore, he gave a nod of acknowledgement and admitted, "How did you know?" "The goddess told me I must save you because you still have plenty of work left to do." Derek flinched, recalling her words from the vision. "You still have work to do." A look of profound, sudden admiration washed over his face, and he prostrated himself entirely at Ian's feet, showing the utmost reverence. "I bow before you, apostle sent by the goddess." The companions traveling with them found Derek's behavior completely ridiculous. There was zero doubt that Ian had used magic to save Derek, but calling him an apostle of the goddess meant the guy was definitely hallucinating. Let's just keep observing him for a while longer. Nevertheless, everyone let out a collective sigh of relief, their hearts filling with absolute peace. With her hands on her hips, Manny couldn't help but chime in with surprise. "You guys were all practically on the brink of death, yet you still managed to exert so much energy." After gathering his composure, Salvador rallied his comrades. "All right, shall we continue hunting the manticore?" The entire squad hit the road again, completely fired up, shouting, "Sir, yes sir." Ian also began to map out a different strategy with his beloved pet crow. "I'll have Oberon fly ahead to scout the path." Hearing this, Salvador expressed a bit of concern. "Is that safe? It could run into danger." After the crow launched into the blue sky, Ian quietly offered a single-word reply, "No." Salvador truly couldn't fathom the boy's intention. Remembering the manticore's thoroughly menacing face, Ian's resolve hardened even further. He glanced at the group with a dead serious expression. "I know that creature isn't some ordinary piece of garbage, which is exactly why we need to beat it to an absolute pulp." Throughout the town, agonized screams and scattered piles of debris were everywhere. The manticore launched an assault on a village, leaving the citizens utterly paralyzed with fear. "A monster," someone screamed, as the villagers fled in a frantic panic in every single direction. A young man was holding his father's hand when, without warning, his father collapsed back. Roland spun around in sheer horror, shrieking, "Father!" But there was absolutely nothing he could do. The manticore was already standing directly behind them, a mere few paces away from his father. In that desperate moment, Roland spotted a three-pronged rake resting nearby. Without hesitating for a single second, he raised the rake toward the beast's face and threatened, "Get the hell out of this town right now." Even though Roland was desperately trying to compose himself, his entire body kept trembling violently, you literal monster." The manticore let out a low, contemptuous chuckle. "So this human is your father." Roland's terror intensified. How can you speak human language?" The beast's booming voice rang out in a mocking challenge. "I'll make you a highly generous offer. Slaughter your father and present him to me. If you can do that, I will spare the lives of every single remaining human." Roland trembled more and more, but he refused to submit to such an outrageous demand, firing back. "Do you seriously think I would ever agree to that?" The manticore twisted its face into a bizarre grin. "In that case, there's no other way." It let out a massive roar, raising its razor-sharp claws. At that critical instant, the youth threw his own body over Bastion to shield him, screaming, "Father." Right before the fatal blow could land, a piercing arrow came whistling through the air. Fresh blood began to spill from the manticore's body as a new wound manifested clearly. Salvador materialized just in the nick of time. The moment he arrived, he engaged in a fierce battle with the manticore, determined to prevent it from claiming another innocent life. Staring up in utter bewilderment, the father and son gasped, "The Knights of Santiago." Salvador looked at the men behind him and barked out with absolute authority, "Prepare for battle." The entire group began drawing up a formation, aiming straight at the monster in the center. Even though the manticore was blinded in one eye, his combat prowess remained fierce, and he bared his fangs in pure fury. "Do you animals want to die that bad?" Ian stepped out onto the grassland where the sunlight beamed directly onto his body, letting out a smirk. "What an absolute idiot. How pathetic." Ian's gaze locked onto him with sheer contempt. Struggling at this point is completely useless. Being openly mocked made the manticore completely lose his cool. "Shut up, mate." But Ian still treated him like nothing more than an absolute thorn in his side. "Is that just the barking of a loser? All talk and no action." He successfully infuriated the manticore, causing the beast to spin around and charge straight toward him. Insolent brat. With that, he came barreling at top speed toward his opponent. And every single bit of this was playing out exactly according to Ian's calculation. The manticore kept charging forward at a frantic pace in his blind rage. Right at the very last second, Manny jumped right in front of Ian to shield him. She muttered a few lines of an incantation. "Oh, wood, grow." Out of nowhere, the surrounding grass and flora violently stirred and shot skyward. Thick vines abruptly manifested from both sides of the manticore, weaving into a tight binding rope that wrapped completely around him. "What the hell is this?" Salvador and his troops immediately seized this golden opportunity to strike, and right now, the soldiers began gripping their weapons, preparing to engage in combat. They rapidly unleashed a barrage of attacks, aimed directly at the manticore's body. The beast roared and thrashed around wildly, reduced to relying on nothing but pathetic, desperate tricks. But the plan didn't just stop there, and Manny mumbled out his name. "Ian, you're up." Ian's gaze turned completely detached as he looked toward the enemy. He snapped his fingers, aiming his staff straight ahead. "Oh, fire, burn." The arrogance in the manticore's eyes completely vanished, replaced instead by a look of sheer, horrified disbelief. A massive blaze suddenly erupted, incinerating the manticore within the flames, until finally, only a terrified shriek echoed through the evening wind. Ian looked down with total coldness at the roaring fire, which was now reduced to nothing but flickering embers amidst a pile of ashes. After the fierce blaze subsided, the town finally returned to its usual tranquility. The townspeople collectively bowed their heads without a single word. "Thank you so much." Representing the knights, Salvador replied with total courtesy, "We only did what needed to be done." Meanwhile, Ian stood there watching the man literally bask in a glorious aura, casting a deeply peculiar look his way. Oberon quickly leaned into his ear and whispered, "Master, did you just get sidelined?" Transforming his embarrassment into pure rage, Ian snapped in a low voice, "Shut up." Truthfully, he already had a pretty good idea of what the answer was. The townspeople were probably terrified of him, because he had just turned the manticore into a giant fireball. But right then, the sound of approaching footsteps snapped Ian right back to reality. Roland stepped forward alongside his father and spoke with deep respect. "Lord Mage, thank you for saving our lives." Ian was caught so off guard by this situation that he went completely tongue-tied, his mind swirling with immense awkwardness, thinking, "It's not like I did this just to get thanked." But while he was completely lost in thought, Salvador timely joined the conversation. "Ian, you were genuinely impressive out there. We only managed to take down the manticore thanks to you." The sudden flood of praise caught Ian completely off guard, leaving him frantically stammering out a textbook response. "I only did exactly what Manny told me to do." Seeing someone old enough to be his father figure groveling before him made Ian panic even more. "Please, lift your head up." His humble tone left Salvador slightly stunned. thinking it was incredibly rare to see someone with such terrifying power possess this kind of personality. He stared fixedly at Ian's face and came to a silent conclusion. A guy like him might actually become a massive figure who puts the nobility to absolute shame. Right about then, a barrage of rushed footsteps began echoing closer and closer to them. A group of soldiers marched toward Ian and Salvador, interrogating them. "Are you the ones who captured the manticore?" Salvador admitted it immediately without a shred of hesitation. "That's right." One of the men quickly chimed in. "Apologies for the late introduction, but we are knights serving under the castle." Hearing that specific term instantly piqued Ian's curiosity. The castle. The soldier gestured to him as he spoke. "Yes, sir. If it's not too much trouble, please come with us. The Count has requested your presence at the castle." The moment the group was illuminated by the radiant light of a massive chandelier, a deep, resonant voice echoed in their ears. "Welcome, brave warriors. I never expected you to take a stand against that monster in the name of the heavens." Swirling his wine glass, Katina enthusiastically rattled off a stream of formalities. "Truly, you possess righteous soul." Salvador awkwardly raised his glass, declining the praise with pure politeness. "Oh no, we didn't go that far." Katina immediately let out a countersigh. "What a pity." He gestured toward the feast where people were eating and drinking, making a snide remark. "If only this castle possessed knights as capable as you guys." With that, Katina quickly shifted his attention to the other high-profile figure. "Yes, Mage Manny, you can rest assured that I won't let those priests lay a single finger on the forest where you live." Having secured his explicit guarantee, she replied clearly, naturally. After beating around the bush forever, Katina finally turned his gaze toward our protagonist. "Furthermore, Mage Ian, I have heard all about you from my niece." Before he could even finish his sentence, he went completely choked up, utterly stunned by the way the kid was inhaling his food like a starving refugee. Ian only snapped out of it when Oberon couldn't bear to watch anymore and gave a quiet nudge, whispering, "Hey, that guy is talking to you, master." He instinctively blurted out, "What?" His overly casual attitude completely froze Katina right on the spot, the Count thinking, how dare he take that kind of attitude with me? Sensing the hostility radiating from the man, Ian's eyes flashed slightly. He quickly managed to damage control before the atmosphere grew any worse. "My bad, the food was just so delicious that I didn't hear you. I was actually just talking back to the crow." Only then did Katina crack a forced smile, satisfied. "Ah, I see." He smoothly went right back to his original script. "I heard you've been taking good care of my niece." The moment the words left his mouth, a servant nearby practically blinded Ian by presenting a gleaming alloy box. He stammered for a good while before managed to choke out, "This is." But looking inside, his internal monologue instantly found the answer as a detailed user manual for a metal magic book flashed rapidly through Ian's head. All he needed to do was tear it in half, and the magic sealed within would instantly activate. He cautiously lifted it up to inspect it, and the more he looked, the more his mind began to reel, thinking, "Wow, I can literally feel the incredible quality woven into every single word." Katina waited for Ian to snap out of his daze before proudly bragging, "Well, do you like it? I had that prepared specifically for you." Ian didn't stand on ceremony, tucking the treasure securely into his chest as he returned the favor. "Thank you very much for such a precious gift." The Count generously played along. "Think nothing of it." Katina rubbed his index finger and thumb together, continuing to express his thoughts. "You brought Lucy back safely. Compared to that, this item is absolutely nothing." The moment he finished speaking, he suddenly let out a sharp snap of his fingers. As if guided by pure magic, the doors gently cracked open, leaving a small gap. Looking incredibly gorgeous, Lucy stepped into the room under the gaze of dozens of staring eyes. Ian was the only one who completely ruined the moment by clapping a hand over his mouth to stifle a laugh, internally giggling. What is up with that ridiculous hat? The closer he looked, the more he felt like his personal sense of aesthetics was being brutally violated. Suddenly, Lucy cleared her throat to build up some momentum. The next second, her face flushed red as she asked a thoroughly plain question. "It's been a while, how have you been?" And Ian's response was even more dry. "Yeah, long time no see." Salvador immediately picked up on the romantic tension and openly teased them. "So it turns out she wasn't your sister, she's your girlfriend." Ian quickly raised his wine glass to cover his embarrassment. "It's not like that at all, it's a bit complicated." Katina didn't give him any time to settle down, cutting right back in. "Ian, I have a proposition for you." He mechanically lifted his head and asked, "What kind of proposition?" The Count darted his eyes over to Lucy and stated matter-of-factly, "On this journey to avenge my niece, would you be willing to lend me your strength?" Only then did the realization hit Ian, thinking, "Ah, so that's why he gave me this metal magic book. It's not like I'm going to have to risk my neck on a literal battlefield anyway." Ian composed himself incredibly fast and began running the numbers in his head, figuring he just needed to provide a moderate amount of magical support, exactly like he did against the mantle. If everything goes smoothly, I can pull double the compensation from both the Count and Lucy. Since there was a clear profit to be made, Ian wasn't stupid enough to turn it down, saying, "If you truly have need for the strength of a humble mage like myself." He raised his head and declared with absolute clarity, "I will accompany you on your journey." 3 days later, the sound of casual chatter echoed outside the castle gates. "My uncle is deeply sorry that he couldn't be here to see everyone off, but he had to prepare for the campaign. No worries." Even though she was reassured, Lucy still gave a polite promise. "Once you guys return to the Terrian territory, I will personally host the reception." Salvador solemnly shook her hand and replied, "I'm genuinely looking forward to that." Ian stood right next to them in complete silence, turning over the transaction that had just taken place in his mind, noting that the number of knights had decreased significantly after being deployed by the Count. Suddenly, Salvador's voice snapped him right back to the present. "Ian, thank you for everything." He shifted his attention over to the old man and replied, "Same here." Salvador seized the opportunity to smoothly suggest, "When you have some free time, make sure to visit Trifar Island. I'll introduce you to some arcane entities that you might find highly interesting." Just a tiny hint was enough to get Ian completely hooked. Trifar Island. The old man confidently explained in thorough detail, "It's a floating island drifting over the Coral Sea. Just tell them you're there to see Salvador, and everyone will absolutely welcome you with open arms." Ian blinked blankly and blurted out, "Wait, is that actually your real name?" The man casually admitted it. "There's no harm in telling you at this point." Suddenly, he placed a hand over his heart and introduced himself with immense gravity. "My name is Salvador of the Orgus House." Lucy's eyes instantly went wide as saucers as her mouth repeated the name, Salvador of Orgus. She stammered, trying to double-check. "There's no way, Salvador of the White Wolf." Looking a bit embarrassed by her intense enthusiasm, he brushed it off. "There's really no need to remember the name of an old geezer." Ian was the only one who completely missed the memo, asking with total innocence, "White Wolf?" Lucy looked at him like he was completely brain-dead and chided, "Are you seriously that clueless?" The White Wolf mercenary group used to be incredibly prosperous under the former emperor. To honor their leader, the emperor at the time personally bestowed upon him the highest title, Sword Master. Lucy suddenly pointed a finger right at the man and squealed in utter bewilderment. "So this man is..." Salvador awkwardly scratched his face as she explicitly stated his profession, a sword master. Seeing her look so completely blown away, Ian asked in confusion, "What's with the massive reaction?" Lucy suddenly cheered, "He's a literal legend, a living legend." Seeing her like this, Ian just gave a casual, flat nod, "Aha, a legend." Salvador burst into a hearty laugh at this. "You know, you're pretty much the exact same as me." Hearing this, Ian went completely blank. "What do you mean by that?" An image popped into Salvador's head of someone thinking, "I will be the one to defeat the Sword Master." With those thoughts, he looked at Ian with a knowing smile. "Never mind. Well then, we shall take our leave here." Standing nearby, Manny also took the chance to give a reminder. "Give Eredis my regards. Thank you for everything." Out of nowhere, Julian burst into tears, tightly grabbing Ian's hand. "We absolutely have to meet again, okay?" Ian thought to himself with a helpless scowl. "It's not like we're parting ways forever or something." Suddenly, Salvador called out loudly, "Ian." He immediately grabbed Ian's hand in a firm grip. Seeing this, Ian politely locked eyes with Salvador and said, "Once everything is settled, I'll definitely head over to Trifar Island." Salvador's face completely lit up as he chimed in, "I'm sure we'll cross paths again by then." With that, both sides officially bid each other farewell. "Until that day comes, take good care of yourself." Right at that moment, over on Katina's side, he slowly stepped up onto the podium. But Katina's face couldn't completely hide his deep, pensive thoughts. He blankly recalled how Lucy had been kneeling on the ground, weeping as she begged, "Uncle, please bring the person who murdered my mother to justice." Thinking back to this, Katina's gaze hardened instantly, radiating an indescribable, chilling bloodlust. Graham dared to murder my sister, and he actually intends to go through with a wedding with Lucy. However, as far as the Katina territory is concerned, this situation isn't entirely bad. I can use Lucy as a literal shield to secure my territory, and then marry her off to one of my subordinates. The Terrian territory will fall right into my hand. Deep within Katina's eyes, a look of absolute, utter loathing manifested clearly. Snapping back to Ian's side, he was currently staring intently at Lucy's glowing face, thinking, "Once this entire mess is over, I'll try to have a proper chat with Lucy." Standing on the podium with fierce resolve, Katina declared, "In the name of the laws of this land, I pronounce judgment upon that dead man who abused his power. The soldiers gathered below shouted in unison, "Long live the Count." Katina's determination grew even fiercer. "Everyone, follow me." Meanwhile, nightfall had officially descended upon the military camp. Inside the kitchen area, Ian was busy tinkering around with something. Sitting right next to him alongside two soldiers, Lucy asked in confusion, "Ian, what on earth are you doing?" He kept his eyes locked on the violently bubbling pot of water. "I'm boiling a spoon." Hearing his response, a thought immediately popped into Lucy's head. Why? Is he planning to boil it and eat it? Suddenly, the two soldiers whispered to each other from a distance. "I heard the mage is brewing some kind of soup. Let's keep our distance." Hearing their gossip, Ian cursed silently under his breath, "Idiots, I'm sterilizing it." Sitting nearby, Lucy overheard him and blinked blankly. "Sterilizing." Seeing her looking so completely clueless, Ian explained, "It's basically similar to arcane magic." Explaining it properly was completely pointless anyway. The two soldiers looked even more utterly stunned than Lucy. Arcane magic. A moment later, a calling voice echoed from right behind Ian's back, "Lord Mage." The two soldiers walked up to him awkwardly, asking, "Could you mind boiling this item for me too?" Seeing their behavior, Ian's blood boiled with absolute frustration. "I already told you guys it's not a damn soup." As the night went on, the entire camp was happily going about their business, when Lucy suddenly let out a faint sigh. "Hey Ian, I've been thinking about something." Hearing this, Ian knit his brows and looked at her. "What's up?" Lucy darted her eyes over to him. "Your promised reward." Hearing those words, Ian instantly remembered. "Oh, right." Lucy looked at Ian with total gravity. "I originally planned to give you gold, but I figure you're probably bored of that by now." The moment the words left her mouth, Ian's eyes went wide in pure shock. Lucy spoke with a gentle laugh. "So I spent a really long time thinking about what kind of item would actually satisfy you. And the result was," he looked at her, utterly intrigued. As it turned out, Lucy began recounting the tale of the magic sword Anariza. That was a gift bestowed by the ancient ancestors upon the very first generation Baron Tarian. Legend has it that the Baron fell deeply in love with a fairy, and wielding that very sword, he became the savior of the fairy realm. Reaching this part of the story, Ian's face went completely blank, thinking, what kind of generic fantasy novel plot line is this? He scowled at Lucy, asking, "If the Tarian house possessed such a powerful magic sword, why are you guys still just barren?" She immediately fired back. "That story happened 400 years ago." Ian asked flatly, and Lucy broke into a deeply embarrassed smile. "Anariza was buried right inside the tomb of the first-generation Baron. So if you want to get your hands on it, we're going to have to dig up the grave." Ian's jaw dropped so hard his face couldn't hide the pure horror he felt, thinking, a descendant is actually going to grave rob an item that her own ancestor personally buried, just to hand it over to someone else. Ian's face went completely pale as he stared at Lucy. "So your family's ancestral tomb is basically just a time capsule." Caught off guard by his sudden question, Lucy blinked blankly. "What do you mean?" Ian asked out of sheer curiosity. "I don't really get it, but it's a magic sword, right? And it seems like it holds immense value. Shouldn't it be better if your family keeps it for yourself?" "That has to be a whole lot better than just letting it serve as a baron's bragging right forever, don't you think?" Lucy pouted slightly and told Ian, "I haven't been able to give you anything in return yet, but thanks to you, I've secured my right to fight, and I am incredibly grateful for that." As she spoke, she clenched her hands tightly together. "It is valuable enough that I want to give it to you as a token of my appreciation." Lucy suddenly stood straight up. "That's exactly why I said I would give you that precious item." She grew so angry that she turned her back and stormed off. "You idiot." Seeing her run away, Ian panicked. Lucy. Left behind, he quietly watched her retreating figure, thinking, maybe I went a bit too far with my words. Right at that moment, someone approached him. "Mage, the Count has a favor to ask of you." As the night grew progressively darker, shouting echoed from a corner of the military camp. "If you don't want your heads hung on a spike, then get the hell out of here, you damn thieves." With a thoroughly arrogant and defiant expression, Otto shot back, "We should be the ones saying that to you. Just hand over 3 chickens and we'll leave you guys alone." Instantly, Diet closed the distance and pressed right up against the man. "We have a battle to fight, understand? If we're out here starving, where are we supposed to get our energy from, right?" Suddenly, Otto's face turned completely pale. In a panic, he pointed a finger up toward the canopy of the trees. "Isn't that crow exactly like the one that Mage keeps?" Helmut stared up thoughtfully, hearing your words. All of a sudden, Oberon flapped his wings and squawked loudly, "The Crow Master is here. My Crow Master has arrived." Otto, Diet, and Helmut's faces turned utterly pale as they gasped. "What the hell? The damn crow can actually speak." Immediately afterward, a voice called out from right behind the three of them. Their faces completely green with fear, Otto, Diet, and Helmut turned around while trembling uncontrollably. Ian walked up, furrowing his brows as he glared at the three men standing before him. What on earth do you think you guys are doing? Beneath the flickering glare of a candle inside the tent, Katina spoke up first with a thoroughly grave expression. Ian, I have a favor to ask. Maintaining his usual calm demeanor, he inquired back, what is it? The man let out a slight cough, looking exceptionally hesitant. Staring at him, Ian wondered, he looks like he's having a hard time bringing it up. What exactly could this be about? After a moment of deliberation, Katina finally decided to speak his mind. I want you to put a stop to the misconduct of the mercenaries in this town. Ian was caught off guard for a split second before questioning. Wouldn't knights be much better suited for that task? Rubbing his fingers together, the old man slowly explained. Because the knights and the mercenaries are comrades, they constantly cover up each other's misdeeds and turn a blind eye. Naturally, that is done to maintain the mercenaries' morale. I could have tolerated a certain amount of looting, but this happens to be my niece's territory. I am counting on you. As long as you give them a warning, the mercenaries will learn to check themselves. Staring at Ian's thoroughly darkened expression, the soldiers huddled together, shivering uncontrollably from head to toe. In a chilling tone, he demanded, you dare break into a civilian's home like a bunch of bandits. Perched on his shoulder, Oberon chimed in directly, punishment. Ian slammed his staff heavily against the ground as a warning. I will deal with you guys to set an example. Oberon enthusiastically hewed along, punishment. The three men hurriedly admitted their fault. We are sorry, Sir Mage, we will reform our ways. After that, Ian and Oberon only needed to capture a few of them, before the rest grew so utterly terrified that they didn't dare show their faces outside. The mercenaries all hid inside their quarters, trembling as they muttered, if we go outside right now, we're completely done for. Hearing the news, the Count and Lucy were thoroughly overjoyed. But a short while later, Bruno solemnly dropped to one knee to deliver a report. My Lord Count, we have a critical issue on our hands. As it turns out, an unexpected trouble has manifested. Bruno continued his explanation. To those who abuse their power, our forces are no longer considered a threat. Ian immediately questioned, even though we have over 400 troops. Lowering his gaze, the man explained, because our forces are completely harmless. With a deeply confused look, the youth repeated, harmless. If the army were plundering the territory, the citizens here would have long pressured Graham to stop the invasion. Because Graham currently controls the Terrian territory. But thanks to our peaceful march, Graham has actually been granted the time to gather his forces. Not to mention, because our troops aren't allowed to act freely, morale has plummeted severely. Resting his chin on his hand, Ian fell into contemplation, thinking, this has truly become a bizarre predicament. Bruno lifted his head, his voice filled with hesitation. My lord, will you grant permission to begin plundering from this moment on? Thoroughly exhausted, Katina raised a hand to rub his forehead. He slowly turned his gaze toward Ian, asking for his input. Mage, do you happen to have any strategy to address this situation? Standing beside him, Lucy also turned her anxious eyes toward the youth. Ian's gaze grew significantly sharper. He supported his chin, thinking for a few seconds before slowly opening his mouth. Right now, it's not like we are completely out of option. Katina's eyes lit up as he hurriedly pressed, what option? Speak up quickly. Meanwhile, Lucy offered a look of pure adoration, thinking, as expected of Ian. In stark contrast to the two of them, several soldiers standing in the background displayed clear expressions of annoyance. Lucas muttered under his breath, thoroughly displeased. This mage is incredibly arrogant. Somewhere within the Terrian territory, Henrik violently threw the door open, snapping irritably. You're being way too noisy, you obnoxious crow. The sudden, close-up view of Ian's face right in front of him caused him to shriek in terror. Henrik staggered back a few paces, asking hesitantly, Who are you? Instead of answering, Ian questioned him back. Are you the owner of this wheat field? Still thoroughly shaken, the man's voice trembled with a mix of panic. I asked you who you are. A soldier standing behind them lost his patience and cut in. Hey, this gentleman is the disciple of the great Archmage Eredes, Lord Ian Eredes Raven. Hearing that name, Henrik's face instantly turned completely dark. He threw himself to the ground in a panic, begging, I never imagined it would be such a renowned figure. Please forgive my utter rudeness from moments ago. Ian cast a glance down at him, gritting his teeth as he informed, the wheat here has been completely ruined. Henrik raised his head blankly, asking back, what exactly do you mean by that, my lord? Ian slammed his staff firmly against the ground, shouting, can't you sense it? A foul energy has thoroughly permeated this entire field. The soul of the first Baron of Terrian, whose territory was unjustly stripped away, is absolutely furious. Shaking all over with tears streaming down his face, the man asked anxiously, then what am I supposed to do? Tapping his staff against the ground, Ian furrowed his brows and warned, hold on. Silence. Suddenly his eyes flew wide open. Ian raised a hand toward the heavens, declaring in a highly theatrical manner, "The sky is speaking. As long as Lucy Tarian inherits the title of Baroness, the wrath shall be entirely appeased. That is its divine will." Omai over there possesses an ominous energy as well. The moment the words left his mouth, he bolted off. The soldiers hurriedly called out and chased after him, shouting, "Sir Maid." As he ran, he called out loudly, "To think a territory would fall into such decay, all because of a power-tripping oppressor." After some time had passed, it appeared the rumor I spread had successfully run its course. The citizens of Tarian began to harbor deep resentment toward Graham. They demanded that Lucy take the succession to deliver them from the calamity. The citizens continuously hurled tomatoes right at his front door. Thanks to that, the Count's forces experienced a massive surge in morale and marched directly toward Graham's residence. Amidst that celebratory atmosphere, Lucas stood at a distance, glaring at the youth with pure resentment. Back at the camp, he stood at the front to voice his protest. "My Lord Count, we have absolutely no desire to stand upon a battlefield of sheer dishonor." Katina questioned in utter bewilderment, "What exactly do you mean by that?" Lucas immediately accused, "Ian is spreading rumors that the territory is cursed. He is bringing disaster right to our doorstep. If we continue to associate with a mage like him, our honor will be thoroughly dragged through the mud." Ian looked at them with a deeply confused expression and explained, "The rumor is nothing but a lie. Why on earth are you guys actually believing the rumors that I spread myself?" The group fired back even more violently in unison. "We can't trust a single word that comes out of a mage's mouth. Exactly, he is undoubtedly trying to swindle us." He watched the scene unfold in absolute silence, his eyes gradually darkening as the reality of the situation finally clicked. In other words, because they have absolutely no way of distinguishing truth from lies, they simply default to assuming everything I say is a lie. How thoroughly narrow-minded. But the core strength of this army relies on the knights. The Count's expression clearly indicated that he understood that reality perfectly. Without the knights, it's impossible to form a proper battle line, so in the end, we have no choice but to cater to their side. In a situation like this, is there even any reason for me to stay? Nodding Katina's deeply hesitant expression, Ian finally took the initiative to speak up first. "You don't need to trouble yourself." "Count." The man stood straight up, calling out as Ian moved away. Turning his back to leave, the youth didn't forget to emphasize his point. "If my mere existence causes everyone this much discomfort, I will depart. But from this day forward, no matter what happens, don't you dare think of coming to me for help." The moment the protagonist stepped outside the tent, Lucy came rushing out right behind Ian, calling frantically, "Wait up." Hearing her call, Ian turned his head back around. And then Lucy said in a deeply rushed tone, I am so incredibly sorry. Out of nowhere, the knights started pinning all the blame on you. And my uncle was caught in such an awkward position that he couldn't even squeeze out a word to defend you." She spoke with a face that looked on the absolute verge of tears. This display brought a small sense of comfort to Ian's state of mind. He thought to himself, "For some reason, I feel a little bit relieved. It must be because Lucy offered such a sincere apology." Having processed his thoughts, he offered a bright smile and replied, "It's fine, I'm not angry at all." Lucy asked anxiously, "Really?" Ian let out a soft chuckle. "Leaving a battlefield isn't exactly a massive deal, right? Besides, there's absolutely zero mystery to be found in a place filled with nothing but corpses." Standing opposite him, Lucy kept her tear-streaked face as she said, "But you're going to lose your chance to achieve military glory." Her words left both Ian and the crow perched on his shoulder completely speechless. And then a smile broke across his face as he reached out to gently pat her small head and began to reassure her. "What exactly do I gain from military glory anyway? As long as I receive the sword you promised to give me, that's more than enough." The moment she heard those words, Lucy's mood instantly brightened, and she began to make a promise. "I will absolutely make sure to get that sword for you, and if that's still not enough, you can literally just marry me and take over the entire territory." Her sudden proposal thoroughly flustered Ian, causing him to turn his head away. "Yeah, no thanks, I'll pass." Lucy pressed on, "If necessary, I can give you anything else you want, so please just marry me." Ian continued to decline flatly, "No need, thank you." Time flew by rapidly. A few days later, the scene shifted right to the edge of the battlefield. At this moment, the armies of both factions were actively drawing up their forces. Standing from a high vantage point, Graham looked down at the field below and delivered his assessment. "The enemy's numbers appear to be around 400, correct?" Noticing his gaze, a subordinate standing beside him teased, "Captain, you aren't feeling scared, are you?" In response to the comment, Graham let out a mocking sneer. "Me? Since when does Graham of the single-handed sword feel fear?" Then his gaze turned incredibly sharp as he silently cursed to himself. Lucy truly has some nerve, daring to side with that count. But it's completely futile. Once I win this battle, she will belong to me entirely. Furthermore, we have the exceptionally battle-hardened Black Knights of the East on our side. Our advantage is simply overwhelming. Thinking of this, the man couldn't help but smirk once again. Right at that moment, another voice barked out, "Captain, the enemy forces are advancing." Seeing this, Graham gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and declared, "Whether the enemy has 400 or 4,000 troops is entirely irrelevant. Anyone who dares to cross blades with Graham will forfeit their life." Everyone charged. Following his command, the entire regiment spurred their horses into a full gallop straight ahead. In no time at all, the two opposing armies clashed head-on in a fierce collision. The scene shifted back to the location of Ian's group. As they monitored the battlefield, Commander Bruno remarked, "We currently hold the upper hand." Ian agreed, "It certainly looks that way." Internally, he felt a quiet sense of relief at this development. The disparity in their numbers was massive. At this rate, victory is practically guaranteed. However, in the very next second, his expression completely changed. "Hold on a minute, what is the deal with that knight over there? He is insanely powerful." Following his gaze, a knight clad in pure black armor was tearing through the battlefield, entirely unstoppable. Witnessing this display, Commander Bruno immediately explained, "That Black Knight hails from the Eastern Empire. It's a viscounty universally famous for its brutally long winters. There's absolutely no mistaking that distinctive black armor." The man's sudden appearance put Ian on high alert. He couldn't comprehend why a foreign knight would be present on this battlefield. On this side of the field, yet another soldier fell victim to the knight's blade. The Black Knight's velocity was so extreme that with a single sweeping dash, he effortlessly cut down multiple men. The longer Ian watched him fight, the more tense his expression became. "This is highly unusual. Our left and right wings are completely dominating, yet the center army is actively retreating. If this trend continues, the situation is going to turn exceptionally critical, don't you think?" Driven by his growing concern, he couldn't help but turn to the commander and inquire, "What happens if the center army gets completely breached?" He cast a quick glance toward Ian and muttered in a hushed tone, "If that happens, then we are next in line." His blunt declaration left both Lucy and Katina entirely stunned. On this end, Commander Bruno continued to break it down. To put it simply, if the center army breaks, the enemy forces won't bother chasing down the fleeing foot soldiers. They will head straight for the Count's position. Hearing up to this point, Count Katina could no longer restrain his mounting fury. He slammed his hands down and stood up from his seat, roaring, "A bunch of utterly useless scum. Move out immediately and cut down that Black Knight." Faced with the sudden order, Ian turned to Bruno with a deeply conflicted expression, thinking, "Wait a minute, out of all the people here, why does it absolutely have to be Commander Bruno? He is the only person here who has treated me like an actual human being. He is one of the exceptionally rare individuals who behaves like a true knight. If he gets deployed out there right now, it will be a one-way trip." Out of sheer concern for his new companion, Ian quickly stepped in to advise him, "Hold on, if we can just figure out another approach then." Before the protagonist could even finish his sentence, Bruno had already drawn his sword and accepted the command. Ian hurriedly placed himself directly in front of the man, pleading, "What on earth do you think you're doing?" The commander explained with an unshakable expression, "I must follow the Count's orders and move out to halt the enemy's advance." Ian stared out at the Black Knight, who was continuously wreaking havoc on the field, and wondered, is he seriously planning to face an opponent like that entirely on his own? He did his absolute best to reason with him one last time. "Going out there right now is literal suicide. We'd be infinitely better off securing the Count and retreating immediately." Captain Bruno fiercely fired back, "I have been taken in by his lordship, and I must act in accordance with a knight's oath." Bruno's sheer stubbornness made Ian's face cloud over with intense anxiety as he thought to himself, "I know that, but from a modern person's perspective, going down there is just a completely meaningless death," before screaming out, "This isn't a tactic, you're just throwing human lives away to fill a gap. Just look at those soldiers who are falling out there." On the opposite side, Bruno obviously understood this perfectly well, and he just gave a quiet, silent smile. This made our protagonist realize that the man understood everything completely, yet he was still absolutely determined to go, making Ian grit his teeth in sheer helplessness, thinking, does this entire world always have to sacrifice people just like? Right at that moment, a knight named Silg came rushing up to them. Ian recognized him as the knight in charge of guarding the main army forces. The moment this fat guy arrived, he began urging them frantically, "It is utterly shameful, but we have lost. There is absolutely no time left. I will escort the Count and retreat." His words left Ian completely dumbfounded, thinking, How shameful. You're telling me we lost just like that. What an absolute shameless coward. Completely unaware of the thoughts swirling in the kid's mind, Captain Bruno just turned to him and gave a reminder. Mage Ian, hurry up and escort the Count and Lady Lucy out of here. I will stay behind to hold them off. With that, he quickly mounted his horse and yelled at the top of his lungs, Men, follow me. Watching his retreating figure along with the other knights riding away, Ian questioned internally, is this really going to be okay? Letting Sir Bruno go, he knows perfectly well that he's going to lose his life amidst that pile of human garbage. He is a man who is upholding the knightly spirit until his very last breath. Isn't it completely unfair that he's the only one who has to sacrifice himself for a war started by those absolute idiots? Over on this side, Lucy saw Ian standing completely rooted to the spot and shrieked loudly, What are you doing? The Count has already decided to retreat. We have to get out of here right now. Giving absolutely no response to her outburst, Ian just quietly mounted his horse before turning back to give her a firm warning. My lady, just run away alongside that piece of trash Silg, or whoever the hell you want. When she frantically asked Ian what he was planning to do, he simply replied, I am going to retreat alongside Sir Bruno. Make sure you stay alive so we can meet again, Lucy, he said with a faint smile, while Lucy's face remained utterly consumed by pure, unyielding anxiety. She let out a loud scream as she watched Ian spur his horse, charging straight back toward the chaotic battlefield. Meanwhile, Bruno was on his way when he suddenly caught the sound of Ian calling out his name. Hearing that, Sir Bruno turned around in total bewilderment, the commander asking, Ian, what on earth are you doing here? Ian proposed, I'll lure the enemy away in another direction. You go protect the Count. To this sudden proposition, Griffin couldn't help but shoot it down instantly. There's no way you can pull that off all by yourself. In response to his doubt, Ian just let out an incredibly gentle smile and said, I'm a mage, you know, so I can at least take care of myself out there. His words seemed to bring a touch of relief to Bruno, who admitted, it looks like the kid isn't bluffing at all. Seems like I was just worrying over nothing. As he spoke, he darted his eyes straight ahead to scan the area. Right then, a squad of enemy soldiers came charging directly toward them, shouting in unison, capture him. Seeing this, Bruno didn't hesitate for another second, immediately turning his horse around as he instructed, All right, I'm counting on you then, Ian. Ian gave a firm nod. You take care of yourself too, sir. With that, Ian watched as they quickly sped away from the area. However, before he could observe them any longer, something suddenly zipped right past his face at terrifying speed. An arrow embedded itself deeply into a nearby tree trunk. That split-second brush with death scared Oberon half to death, the creature shrieking, Master, you're going to get yourself killed. His jinxing remarks made Ian a bit annoyed, and he snapped back, shut up. With that, he cast a glance behind him and thought, for now, I'll draw them deep into the woods. Without a moment's hesitation, he spurred his horse straight toward the nearby forest, while the enemy soldiers gave chase in a heated rush, yelling. He fled into the woods. After him, hurry up. Time flew by rapidly, and the scene shifted deep into the heart of the forest, where the enemy squad was still frantically searching for any sign of our protagonist, one of the soldiers calling out, he definitely bolted down this way. Just as the words left his mouth, they spotted a lone figure completely blocking the path up ahead, leaving them utterly baffled. What the hell is that? Cutting back to Ian, his mouth began continuously murmuring a magic incantation. This immediately put the enemy soldiers right on high alert. What is going on over there? What is he muttering under his breath? They questioned frantically right before watching Ian directly rip the magic scroll in his hands wide open. Immediately after, a colossal bolt of lightning struck straight down into the forest. Its raw power instantly triggered a massive explosion on the ground, sending two of the enemy soldiers flying far back through the air, until finally they slammed down and lay completely motionless on the dirt ground. Witnessing this spectacular scene, Ian finally managed to let out a heavy sigh of relief, thinking, phew, well, that takes care of a few of them at least. I wonder if Sir Bruno has managed to link back up with the Count yet. There's no way a guy like him would get taken down by those pursuers, right? I need to go double-check on things. Telling himself this, he quickly hurried away, completely unaware that from a nearby tree trunk not too far away, a dark knight had been silently observing his every move, though the figure made no attempt to stop. Shifting the scene over to Count Katina's location. They hadn't managed to flee very far before Graham's pursuing squad caught up to them, a development that made the fat guy Silg grow incredibly frustrated, gritting his teeth as he barked. Damn it, when the hell did they get here? Meanwhile, the enemy commander, bringing up the rear, immediately ordered his men to fire their crossbows. A volley of arrows came ripping forward through the air at rapid speed, instantly claiming the lives of a few unfortunate soldiers. Even the fat guy Silg ended up taking an arrow directly to his shoulder. Not only that, but the horses completely panics at the onslaught, wildly bucking and throwing their riders violently onto the ground. Ultimately, after that brutal rain of arrows subsided, only Lucy, Katina, and Silg were left breathing. Realizing there was absolutely no path left for escape, Silg stood tall and proud, facing down the approaching enemy soldier. He swiftly swung his sword, instantly finishing off the closest soldier to him. Witnessing this, the remaining soldiers quickly swarmed in to launch a coordinated assault. Unable to react in time, Silg took a heavy hit directly to his body, causing his massive frame to crash backward onto the dirt. Up ahead, Lucy began trembling violently with pure fear, crying out, "What are we supposed to do now?" Katina didn't give an answer, mostly because he had absolutely no clue what to do either. The enemy commander stepped forward with a mocking grin and advised them, "Well now, Count, it's time for you to behave yourself and surrender peacefully." However, at that exact moment, Silg suddenly forced himself back up, letting out a ferocious roar. He was absolutely determined to protect the two figures standing right behind him. His completely crazed appearance actually made even the commander hesitate out of sheer apprehension, muttering, "Is this guy some kind of literal monster?" before letting loose an arrow. The arrow zipped right past Silg's frame and buried itself straight into Katina behind. His body wobbled before he tumbled clean off his horse, sending both Lucy and Silg rushing over to his side in a frantic panic. Cradled tightly in Lucy's arms, Katina's entire body began to shake violently. However, before he could even choke out his final words, his eyes closed, and he drew his very last breath. This outcome caught even the enemy commander completely off guard, making him look a bit anxious as he muttered, "Damn it, I can't believe the Count actually kicked the bucket. The captain explicitly told us that we needed to take him alive. Well, nothing we can do about it now, but at the very least, we absolutely have to secure that girl." He spoke while locking his gaze dead on Lucy. Without a second thought, he barked out his next command, "Hurry up and seize that girl." Obeying the order, the squad of soldiers rushed forward in unison. While Lucy could do nothing but cover her face, trembling in total terror, Silg rapidly threw himself in front of her to block their path. However, his final act of bravery only earned him another brutal wound to his body, sending the old man collapsing right back down onto the dirt, a sight that caused Lucy's face to turn completely pale with absolute horror. She thought frantically to herself, "I don't want to get handed over to Graham like this. Please help me, Ian." Her desperate prayer seemed to be heard by our protagonist, and at the absolute most critical second, a thoroughly familiar voice echoed through the air, "Darkness." The surrounding area was abruptly engulfed in pure, suffocating shadows, throwing the enemy soldiers into total chaos as they screamed, "What the hell is this? I can't see a damn thing." Lucy scrambled to her feet in sheer bewilderment, darting her eyes all around her. But before she could make out a single thing, Ian's hand firmly gripped her arm, tossing her straight onto the back of a horse. And then he rode away at breakneck speed, cleanly breaking out of the zone enveloped by darkness. A heavy look of anxiety still hung visibly over his face, but it was more than enough to instantly make Lucy feel completely safe and calm. Snapping back to Ian, he frantically asked about the situation. "Lucy, what happened to the Count?" Bringing up his name made her expression instantly collapse into deep sorrow as she whispered, "He's gone." Hearing this grim piece of news, our protagonist froze dead in his tracks for a split second, but he quickly pressed on with his questions. "Are you hurt anywhere?" She shook her head. "No, thanks to you I was saved. Thank you." She then added, "What exactly is happening out there? Where is Sir Bruno?" Ian himself looked a bit uncertain regarding this query, replying, "He was supposed to be heading straight toward you. It looks like something went completely sideways out there. I'm sure he's fine though. For now, let's head straight toward the river. We have to focus on cutting off the tail of that dark knight who's been silently tracking us from behind." Hearing this, Lucy gasped and violently snapped her head back to look. Sure enough, she spotted the ominous dark knight mounted on a horse, charging down on them at terrifying speed.